Dystopia, Visions of the Apocalypse, Volume 2, The Dead Man's Ledger. By Arthur Dubthach. Prologue. A story no one will print. Rain hammered the glass like a fist that had forgotten how to knock and only knew how to break things. Connor Blackwood sat alone in the newsroom, an island of tired light in a sea of dark. Overhead strip bulbs hummed and flickered, the same way they had when he was 22 and idealistic and believed good stories changed bad worlds. Now he was pushing 40, the Borough Gazette's most stubborn investigative reporter, and he knew better. Good stories didn't change the world, they just put a target on your back. The office always felt smaller after midnight. Desks seemed to crowd closer, filing cabinets leaned in, walls folded in around him like they were listening. Beyond the big front windows, the city had collapsed into bruise-colored night, no clear skyline, just a smear of light and shadow bent by the rain. He tightened the frayed grey scarf round his neck and woke his battered laptop with a tap of his finger. The encrypted folder waited where he'd left it to the ledger. 9 documents, for video files, 17 images, and underneath them, the message from the source. Please. Before they start the cull. His cursor hovered, just for a moment, over the first file. Too late to pretend he'd never seen it. Too late to tell himself this was just another disgruntled civil servant with a grievance and a shaky grasp of reality. He clicked. The document opened with the indifferent chill of government prose. Project Vision Stream, Overview. Classification, Sovereign Eyes Only. Objective, National Behavioral Management and Population Stabilization. Population Stabilization. He'd covered housing crises, school cuts, suicides in tower blocks whose cladding peeled like burnt skin. He knew the phrases stabilization meant someone up there thinks there are too many of you down here. He scrolled. Decision matrices, flow charts, mortality curves climbing like mountain ranges, acceptable loss bands shaded in a neat, muted grey. Then the heading that made his scalp prickle. Operation Night Harvest, Phase I, Domestic Reduction. Strategy. Domestic reduction. Not depopulation, never the ugly words, always the smooth ones. Connor sat back, feeling his pulse thump in his throat. He could taste metal on his tongue, like the air in MRI suites and funeral homes. This wasn't the first ugly story to land in his lap. He'd followed arms deals through shell companies, watched councillors resign over procurement scandals, chased police misconduct that never reached the front page. He'd even gone up to Glasgow once, years back, to cover a strange case, an ex-patient with a ledger and a conspiracy too big for the page, a story that had died in legal threats and a quiet spike. But this was worse. This was death administration murder as policy extinction with an index number. He clicked the next file. A network diagram unfolded across the screen, pale lines on dark background, like a spiderweb drawn by a nervous god. At the center, Cabinet Office, Home Office, Department of Health and Social Care. From them, tendrils stretched outward, to pharmaceutical contractors, data analytics firms, logistics hubs, and then, inevitably, to the thing that made his chest tighten. National Media Infrastructure, Liaison Chamber, the Circle of the Radiant Thorn. The name pulsed on the screen, a simple label that carried a weight he couldn't name. He knew the rumors. Everyone in the trade did. An old boys' network of senior broadcasters, editors, pundits. Posh men with immaculate hair and curated faith, who liked to talk about family values and moral clarity on Sunday panels. The file described something else. Legacy ritual order embedded in post-war media consolidation. Cellular compartmentalization. Narrative control as non-kinetic pacification. Dark druids in modern suits, priests of story, high priests of silence. The document flicked to photographs, grainy stills of men and women in studios and boardrooms, faces half-lit by studio lamps, the barest hint of curving ink beneath their shirt cuffs and collars, tattoos that weren't quite decorative. knots and thorns and circles. Connor rubbed his eyes and looked again. It didn't change. He clicked onward. Another file, this one a technical brief. Cognitive Compliance Module, Neural Interface Implant, CCMNIMK2. Phase, Field Ready, Limited Pilot. He skimmed signal patterns. Behavioral dampening. Impulse suppression. Crowd serenity optimization. Crowd serenity. He snorted once, a bitter sound in an empty room. They're going to lobotomize the whole country, he muttered. Thunder cracked somewhere above the roofs, close enough that the glass vibrated. The newsroom lights flickered, then steadied. He opened a video file. The image was flat and clinical, a white room, a metal chair, a man strapped in with padded restraints. His eyes flicked wildly, sweat beading on his forehead. His voice was audible only as fragments beneath the sound of his breathing. Said I'd volunteer, not like this, please. Off-screen, a woman in a lab coat read from a clipboard. Initiate behavioral dampening sequence. The man jerked the monitor's spike. He tried to scream, but his jaw locked halfway, neck muscles straining. Connor flinched as the video cut abruptly to black. He clicked the next one. A media rehearsal room. A senior news anchor he recognized, everyone recognized, leaned against a desk, jacket open, shirt crisp, smile easy. Off camera, someone read bullet points. Okay, the anchor said, picking up a script. Remember, emphasize voluntary compliance. Avoid the phrase implant. Use resilience module. And for God's sake, do not mention mortality projections. The audience switches off if you talk about death. He laughed. Someone laughed behind the camera. The anchor's smile never reached his eyes. Connor closed the video and pinched the bridge of his nose, feeling the beginnings of a migraine throb behind his left eye. This was real. The metadata checked out. The encryption keys matched the anonymous whistleblower's signature. He traced the route from buried Whitehall servers, bounced through 5 countries, finally landing in his inbox with one desperate plea. Before they start the cull. The rain intensified, a constant roar against the windows now. Somewhere, a siren wailed and faded. He stood, chair scraping softly against scuffed lino, and walked to the window. The street below was almost empty, a taxi coasting past, its headlights hazy through the downpour. The city felt like it was holding its breath. His breath clouded the glass as he leaned his forehead against it, closing his eyes. Part of him wanted to walk out. Delete the files, drop the laptop in the river, go home, pretend he'd never seen the ledger. Go back to writing about bin collections and council corruption and the slow decay of small places. He imagined it for a moment. The kettle at home, the microwave dinner, the television murmuring nonsense. A small life. A safe one. He opened his eyes. The reflection in the glass looked older than he remembered, grey in his beard, tiredness carved deep around the eyes. But something else was still there, stubborn and ugly and alive. He was a journalist. A dying species, yes, but not extinct yet. He turned back to his desk. The air in the room felt wrong. Someone was standing in the doorway. For a heartbeat, Connor thought it was just the light playing tricks. The figure was barely there, a disturbance in the gloom. Tall. Narrow. Cloaked in shadow in a way that didn't make sense in fluorescent lighting. It didn't move. Didn't speak. Just watched. Hello? Connor said, voice cracking slightly. The figure stepped backward without a sound, dissolving into the dark corridor as if the shadows had simply folded around it and swallowed it whole. The skin on Connor's arms prickled. He grabbed his phone, thumb fumbling at the torch app, and swept the beam down the corridor. Empty desks, dark printers. No footsteps, no receding door. just the hum of electricity and the ticking of the building's old bones. He swallowed, shut the laptop with more force than he intended, and slid it into his satchel. He powered everything else down, the desktop monitor, the desk lamp, the small fan he liked to pretend made the room breathable in summer. On his way out, he paused beside the awards shelf. His first plaque from years ago. Some regional prize for a story about care homes and budget cuts. He'd believed, back then, that such things mattered. Jesus Christ, he whispered, hand still on the satchel strap. They're actually going to do it. A cold draft brushed the back of his neck. Do what you must, Heron, something seemed to whisper just beyond hearing. Fly while you still have wings. He spun. No one there, just paper, glass, rain. He shook himself, laughed once without humor, and walked toward the exit. Behind him, in the darkened newsroom, a single monitor he hadn't touched flickered awake for a moment. Lines of code flashed, then vanished. Somewhere, buried deep in the laptop in his bag, a dormant script quietly woke and made a note off time. The story had begun. Chapter 1. The leak. The kettle in the Gazette's kitchenette rattled like it was afraid of boiling itself to death. Connor leaned against the worktop, thumbs pressed into the small of his back, staring at the cheap plastic as steam hissed from its spout. For hours of broken sleep had done nothing to steady him. His dreams had been full of white rooms and screaming men and a circle of stones lit by studio lamps. The office around him gradually filled with daytime noise. The Borough Gazette waking up. Phones started ringing, printers choked out early press drafts, some idiot in web pressed play on a meme video, laughter leaking through thin walls. It all sounded faint to Connor, like he was listening from underwater. The kettle clicked off. He poured boiling water into the chipped Best Dad mug, an office relic no one claimed, and watched the teabag bloom. The tannin swirl looked like satellite images of storms. He stared at it for too long. Behind him, a familiar voice barked, "If you scowl at that tea any harder, it'll unionize." He turned. Ellie, one of the new interns, leaned in the doorway, cradling her own mug. She wore a bobbler jumper 2 sizes too big and had her hair in a messy knot held up by 3 different pens. "You look like crap," she observed, not unkindly. "Good morning to you too," Connor muttered. "You on the late shift last night?" "Something like that." She narrowed her eyes. "You're doing the face you do when you found something big and illegal." "I have no idea what you mean." "Liar." She grinned. "Graham's looking for you. He's in early and in a foul mood, so, good luck with that." "Isn't he always in a foul mood?" "Yeah, but today it's in italics." She drifted away, humming something tuneless. Connor took his tea and headed to his desk. The Gazette's newsroom was a maze of desks pressed too close together, tangled cables, and half-dead spider plants. Old front pages, riots, floods, royal visits, were framed crookedly on the walls. The carpet had seen too much coffee and not enough cleaning. He sank into his chair and slid the laptop out of his bag. For a long moment he just looked at it. The hinge was cracked on one side. A sticker from some forgotten student radio station was peeling at the corner. This machine had outlived 2 relationships, 4 phones, and a car. "You're going to kill me," he told it quietly. "You know that, right?" He powered it on. The encrypted folder reappeared on the desktop of the ledger. His tea tasted like cardboard as he took a sip and opened it. Everything was still there. 9 documents, .for videos, .17 images. No mysterious deletions. No remote wipes. No access denied warnings. He opened one of the mortality projections. A table of districts and age brackets and target reduction percentages. Brackford. Southfen. Certain parts of Glasgow. The numbers made his stomach twist. He heard, faintly, the echo of the tree that keeps the secrets whirled in his head, the dead man with the ledger in Glasgow, the warnings no one wanted to hear. He wondered, briefly, if this was what that man had glimpsed, one layer deeper into the machinery. He checked the metadata again. Same route. Same signature. No new red flags. Nothing overt that said this is a trap. That didn't mean it wasn't. He closed the document and clicked one of the videos. Trial observation, Site 3. The screaming man again, strapped to the chair, eyes rolling, a droplet of spit caught at the corner of his mouth. Connor forced himself to watch longer this time. To count. 7 seconds between the activation and the first visible seizure, point 11 to the first loss of voluntary control, point 22 to full collapse. He hit pause and scrubbed back, frame by frame. There, the flash on the man's temple. A thumb-sized implant nestling beneath the skin, like a parasite. Connor's fingers trembled. He closed the video box by box, like sealing doors in a ship that was already sinking. He couldn't carry this alone. Even if Graham refused to publish, he needed someone else to know. To validate that he hadn't lost his mind. He scooped up the laptop and his notes, left his tea half drunk, and threaded his way through the desks to the glass-walled office at the far end. Graham Waugh, editor-in-chief, sat hunched over 3 different screens, a red pen clamped between his teeth. His shirt collar was open, tie loose, hair in its usual state of war with gravity. "You're early," Connor said. Graham pulled the pen out of his mouth and waved it like a weapon. "And you look like a man was about to ruin my day." He squinted at him. "Is this about the bin strike or the councillor with the secret flat in Leeds?" "Neither." "Jesus." "Right." Graham rubbed his forehead. "Come in then. Close the door. If this is another 3-month FOI boondoggle, we may as well get the shouting over with now." Connor stepped inside and shut the door behind him. The glass turned the office into a fish tank, their outside noise reduced to a dull hum. He set the laptop on the desk and flipped it open. "I need to show you something," he said quietly. Graham's sarcasm evaporated the moment he saw the classification stamp on the first document. "Where did you get this?" he asked, voice suddenly flat. "A source inside Whitehall," Connor said. "The same one who tipped the Glasgow case years back, only this time they sent proof." He opened the Vision Stream overview, then the Night Harvest strategy, then the implant brief. Mesmerized as he went, keeping his voice steady, even when his pulse wasn't. Graham's complexion drained from pink to grey. He stood at one point, walked a small, tight circle, then sat again, elbows on the desk, head in his hands. "You've verified this?" he finally asked. "As far as I can. Metadata matches internal systems. Encryption verified via independent tool. It traced the route. It came from inside." Graham stared at the mortality curves. One finger traced a line unconsciously. "Domestic reduction," he muttered. "Christ almighty." "We have to run it," Connor said. Graham laughed once. It sounded like choking. "Run it where, exactly? In your paper? The Borough Bloody Gazette." He jabbed a finger at the screen. "This is state-level classified. This is treason territory, Con." "Treason against what?" Connor shot back. "A plan to cull citizens and tame the survivors with brain tech? If this is true and we sit on it, we're complicit." "We?" Graham's voice cracked. "There is nowhere. There's you, with your suicide drive, and there's me, who has to think about the staff and their kids and mortgages and a lot of them are inside those target zones," Connor said softly. Graham's jaw clenched. Silence stretched between them, heavy as wet concrete. "They'll kill you," Graham said finally. "Or lock you up somewhere no lawyer can reach. Or worse. Or worse? Connor repeated. You don't want to know what law worse looks like when you're up against people who can scrub CCTV and talk to ministers. He rubbed his face. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. Look, if we publish, they take us to court, they bankrupt us in injunctions, they seize the servers and then. I don't think they stop at paper and pixels. So we don't publish? Connor asked. We just let them do it. Graham stared at him for a long moment, eyes bloodshot. We can't publish, he said. Not here. The words hit Connor like a slap. For a second, irrational anger flared. I thought we were supposed to tell the truth. Way, Graham said, almost pleading. But there's telling the truth, and there's walking blindfolded into the path of a train and calling it integrity. He pushed back his chair and stood abruptly. Went to the window. Watched the rain for a moment as if the answer was hidden in the traffic. When he finally turned back, the anger was gone, replaced by something heavier. There's only one place that might touch this, he said. Only one outlet with enough stubbornness and distance to publish without being crushed. Ireland, Connor said. Graham nodded. The Sentinel. Aoife Brennan. She's been a thorn in everyone's side for years. Intelligence boys up north hate her. London hates her. Brussels pretends she doesn't exist. Will she run it? If she believes it's real. Graham's gaze was steady now. If she believes you. Connor blew out a slow breath. So I go to Dublin. You go to Dublin, Graham confirmed. You don't come back here after today. You don't phone, you don't email. You don't leave voicemails when you're drunk. You disappear until this either blows over or blows up the world. You think I'm in that much danger already? Graham hesitated. Someone scrubbed our CCTV last night, he said. Lower floor. Around the time you left. I came in early to check it myself. The recording's just gone. Like that hour never existed. Connor's skin went cold. Could be a glitch, he said weakly. Could be, Graham agreed. Or it could be the kind of people who don't like loose threads in their tapestry. He rounded the desk and put a hand on Connor's shoulder. I can't protect you from this. I can barely protect this place. His grip tightened. So I'm doing the only thing I can do. I'm cutting you loose before they come through Meto get to you. Connor swallowed. That your final word? Graham nodded once. My final word as your editor, he said. As your friend, my final word is, run. They stood there for a moment, two tired men in a glass box, the rest of the newsroom oblivious. Finally Connor closed the laptop and slid it back into his bag. As he opened the door, Graham called softly, Connor. He stopped. For what it's worth, Graham said, voice thick. This is the most important story I've ever seen. I'm just sorry it chose you. Connor managed a tight, humorless smile. Me too. He stepped out into the humming newsroom, its everyday chaos suddenly fragile and precious. He passed Ellie's desk. She was on the phone, gesturing wildly as she tried to convince a Councillor Togo on record about potholes. Normal life is still happening for now. As he reached for his coat, a movement caught his eye. Across the street, behind the veil of rain, a dark van sat idling at the curb. Too new for this part of town. Windows tinted to obsidian. It could have been a delivery vehicle. It could have been nothing. But Connor saw, for a split second, the outline of a camera lens glint in the front windscreen. He turned away, pulling his collar up. The hunt, he realized, hadn't just begun tonight. It might have started years ago, when he first wrote about a dead man in Glasgow and a ledger no paper would touch. Now the title had finally found him, the dead man's ledger. And he was the one holding it. Chapter 2: Shadows in the Newsroom. The Barra Gazette's offices always felt cramped, but that morning they felt wrong. Not the normal wrong of a leaking roof or a broken photocopier, something deeper, something that hummed beneath the surface of the paintwork. The building smelled different. Metallic. Sharp. Like burnt ozone after a storm. As if electricity had walked through the halls during the night and left its fingerprints behind. Connor entered slowly, the door clicking shut behind him with an almost guilty sound. He scanned the open-plan newsroom, forcing his breathing to stay even. These desks, these chairs, these piles of abandoned notes, he'd walked this floor for years. He knew the shape of every shadow, the squeak of every rolling chair. But now the room felt observed. He took a step forward. His shoe stuck for a moment on the carpet. Gum? Coffee? No. A faint tackiness, like resin or sealant, spread in a thin line beside his desk, almost invisible. He crouched, touched it with the very tip of his finger. Cold. Smooth. Manufactured. His pulse thudded. Someone had been here. And not a cleaner. He straightened as casually as he could and walked toward his desk. The Gazette buzzed with morning chaos, phones ringing, printers moaning, Ellie cursing at a frozen screen, but beneath the noise, Connor felt a tension, as if the building held its breath. He reached his desk and froze again. Something had moved. Only slightly. A drawer open a centimeter. A stack of notes no longer aligned. His chair pushed back at an angle he never left it. He knelt, pretending to tie his shoes, and reached beneath the desk. His fingers brushed cold metal. A rectangular device, smooth and featureless except for a tiny pinhole at its center. Not decorative and not accidental. A micro camera, live feed or recording, impossible to tell. His stomach dropped. They were inside already. His phone vibrated against his thigh. He flinched, nearly hitting his head on the underside of the desk. Unknown number. He killed the call instantly. A shadow passed across the carpet beside him. He stood quickly. Ellie. Mr. Blackwood, she said softly, eyes darting. Can I tell you something without you asking questions back? Connor nodded, trying to keep his face neutral. There were men here earlier, she whispered. Before most people arrived. What kind of men? The kind who don't explain themselves. Suits. One flashed an ID, but it didn't look right. She swallowed, voice trembling. They asked about you. Connor felt a cold tide rise inside him. Did they give a name? An agency? No. But they moved like security services. She hesitated, glancing toward the editor's office. One of them kept touching the walls. Like he was sweeping for something. Electronics, Connor realized. Or planting them. Ellie leaned closer. Whatever this is, you should leave. Now. He placed a hand on her shoulder gently. Thank you. She nodded and hurried away, leaving him in the silence between the phones and the printer drone. Connor exhaled slowly. One step at a time. He turned toward the CCTV monitor on the far wall. Normally it showed a loop of the last 12 hours, staff entering, delivery drivers, a drunk once wandering in by mistake. But today? Black, not frozen, not error-coded. Just nothing. A deliberate wipe. His heart sank into his stomach. Someone had scrubbed the building's surveillance the same time the files landed in his inbox. He moved into the narrow corridor leading toward the printing room. The lights flickered overhead. The hum of the fluorescence was wrong, like a tone slightly out of tune, vibrating against the base of his skull. Halfway down the corridor, he stopped. A whisper drifted behind him. Not a voice speaking words, something softer, like breath sliding across stone. He spun around. No one. Just the corridor, just the rattling lights. He forced himself forward, past the framed Gazette front pages, until he reached the heavy door-toed print room. A metallic smell seeped through the crack beneath it. Ink and something older. He didn't open it. His phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. He should ignore it. He knew he should ignore it. But his gut said otherwise. He answered. A voice, low, hoarse, not quite natural, spoke a single sentence. "They've already marked you, Blackwood." The line went dead. Connor stood frozen, phone still pressed to his ear, his own breath hot and too fast. He closed his eyes. Marked. The word echoed with a strange, ancient weight. Not modern. Not intelligence-coded. Ritualistic, the kind of vocabulary you'd find carved into stones at the edge of forgotten forests, not spoken through digital lines. When he opened his eyes, a piece of paper sat neatly on his keyboard. It hadn't been there moments before. He reached out with shaking fingers. The message was handwritten in sharp, angular strokes. "You have seen what cannot be seen. The tongue that speaks will be silenced. The witness will be unmade." Beneath the words were symbols, twisting, knotted curves, almost Celtic, but wrong in a way he felt more than understood. The ink shimmered faintly, like it had been written in something other than biro. Connor folded the note carefully and slid it into his pocket. Someone cleared their throat behind him. He spun. Ron, the building's night shift janitor, stood there, thin, frail, eyes wild with fear. "You shouldn't be here," Ron whispered. "I should have said something last night, but I didn't know who to trust. Not even myself." "Ron, what happened?" Ron swallowed hard, voice trembling. "They came here. Hooded men. 3 or 4. Not police, not thieves. They walked the halls like they owned them. I hid in the boiler room. I heard chanting." Connor's skin crawled. "Did you see their faces?" "No." Ron wiped sweat from his forehead. "Didn't want to. Didn't want to hear them either. Ritual words. Bad ones. Old ones." He glanced nervously over Connor's shoulder. "They were looking for you." Connor felt the corridor shrink around him. Ron's voice cracked. "Do you understand? They weren't breaking in. They were following a trail. Apath. Yours." Connor grabbed his satchel. "Ron. Listen to me. You didn't see me today. You didn't speak to me. You went home early. Understood?" Ron nodded so fast it looked painful. "I didn't see anything. Never do." He shuffled away quickly, disappearing into the stairwell like a man running from his own shadow. Connor didn't wait another second. Laptop, notebook, phone, USB backups with the ledger. He stuffed everything into his bag and moved for the exit. As he pushed through the double doors into the reception area, he risked one backward glance. A tall, dark shape stood at the far end of the corridor. Watching. Not moving. Not breathing. Then, as Connor blinked, it stepped backward into a doorway and vanished. He pushed into the cold morning air, lungs burning as he inhaled freedom tinged with fear. Rain began again, soft at first. He walked faster. He crossed the street, turned a corner. and the world snapped sharply into focus. A car idled with its engine running too quietly. A man adjusted a camera lens from behind a newspaper. Another pretended to check his phone while looking directly at Connor's reflection in a shop window. They weren't subtle. They weren't meant to be. Connor Blackwood was being hunted. He pulled up his hood, tucked his chin down, and disappeared into the maze of back streets before any of them could decide which one would strike first. Chapter 3: MI5 steps out of the dark. The rain didn't fall so much as pour itself over the city, a sheet of icy needles that made every step feel like wading through broken glass. Connor pulled his hood low and kept to the alleys behind the Gazette, senses stretched thin, nerves vibrating like a too-tight wire ready to snap. Every sound felt amplified, every silhouette suspicious, every passing car a potential hunter. His breath fogged the air in short bursts. His ankle still throbbed from the sprint through the newsroom, and a dull ache crept up his spine, the kind that only fear and too little sleep could brew. He wasn't heading home. Home was compromised. He wasn't heading to the train station yet, too visible, too predictable. He simply moved, letting instinct guide him through the maze of narrow lanes, trying to shake the watchers he'd spotted outside the Gazette. A sensor beeped inside his pocket. His phone. A message. He shouldn't check it. He knew better. Digital traps were old tricks in new clothes. But he did anyway. Unknown number. We are not the ones hunting you. Walk to platform 3. Alone. Now. He stared at the message, the cold starting in his gut and spreading outward. MI5, the first word in the previous text, could be a bluff or an attempt to lure him in. Anyone could spoof a government signature. But the watchers at the Gazette had not been subtle. The erased CCTV footage was not sloppy. The ritual note on his keyboard was not the work of bureaucrats. He took one steadying breath, then another. Then he turned and began walking toward the station. He kept to the edges of the streets, eye-scanning reflections in windows and puddles. He passed a closed pharmacy, a shuttered pawn shop, a kebab place that smelled of stale grease even through the rain. At one corner he paused, pretending to adjust his shoelaces while checking behind him. A black car idled at the junction, same model he'd seen near the Gazette. Its headlights dipped, once. A signal. Connor stepped into a bus shelter, pretending to check a non-existent timetable, then slipped down a side alley that fed into a pedestrian underpass. The smell of damp concrete and old urine hit him instantly. Footsteps echoed somewhere behind him. A mumbling drunk slept with a blanket over his face. A flickering light overhead cast long, distorted shadows down the tunnel. At the end of the underpass, dawn had not yet arrived, but the sky held a faint bruise-colored glow enough to reflect on the wet pavement. He reached the station. The meeting at platform 3. The station felt abandoned at this hour. A few night shift workers drifted through like ghosts in reflective jackets. A train clattered somewhere in the distance, metal wheels screeching against track. The rain was a constant hiss against the station roof. Connor moved down the ramp to platform 3, slow, steady, casual, as if he were a commuter catching an early train rather than a journalist on the brink of annihilation. The platform was empty. Completely. Not even a pigeon. Fog clung to the tracks like a living thing. He scanned the space benches, ticket machines, faded posters warning about extremism. A freight train idled silently on the far track. Then he heard it. Blackwood. The voice came from behind him, calm and almost weary. He spun. A man stood a few meters away, hands tucked casually into the pockets of a grey overcoat. He looked alarmingly average. Thinning dark hair. A face lined by stress more than age. Eyes sharp, analytical, tired. He did not look like a killer, but killers rarely did. "I'm Agent Wren," the man said quietly. "MI5. Or what's left of it." Connor didn't lower his guard. "This a trap?" "If it were," Wren replied, "you'd already be dead." He took a slow step closer. We intercepted the leak the moment it left Whitehall, Wren continued. We didn't know who you were until you opened the files. Then why not come to me earlier? Connor asked. Wren gave a thin, humorless smile. Because MI5 isn't a single creature, Mr. Blackwood. It's anist. Some of us are trying to stop Vision Stream. Some are trying to accelerate it. And some think we can steer it. And which are you? The very small group who believe we're already too late. Connor swallowed. So who's hunting me? The Circle of the Radiant Thorn, Wren said simply. They are not government. They are not rogue agents. They are older. Embedded. Ritualistic. Connor studied him carefully. You expect me to believe the British state is being manipulated by druids? Wren's eyes hardened. Dark druids. And don't let the word mislead you. These aren't men in robes chanting in forests. They're media tycoons. Permanent secretaries. Psychologists. Analysts, anchors or policy advisors. They hide their symbols under cufflinks and tattoos beneath collars. They have infiltrated every institution that shapes perception. He paused. And the implant isn't a tool. It's a sacrament, their sacrament. A way to bind the population totter will permanently. A modern ritual system masquerading as a health initiative. Connor felt a chill travel up his spine. And the depopulation. Already underway. Wren's voice dropped. Targeted, deniable, wrapped in language about unexpected side effects and overwhelmed services. Connor turned away, gripping the cold railing behind him. His breath fogged the night air. This is too big, he whispered. How do you fight something like this? You don't, Wren said. Not alone. He reached into his coat. Connor tensed, ready to run or throw himself onto the tracks. Anything. But Wren slowly withdrew a small black device. Dead zone emitter, Wren said. Blocks trackers and short-range intercepts for 60 seconds. Press once. Use sparingly. Connor took it reluctantly, feeling its weight. Why help me? He asked. Wren hesitated. Finally he said, because someone has to survive long enough to tell the world. And you've already been marked. Connor stiffened. What does that mean? Wren met his eyes with a quiet gravity. They call you the heron who pierces the veil. Their prophecy names you as a threat. Myth filtered into intelligence. These people believe in symbols. They think killing you publicly will seal their rise. I never asked to be a symbol. No symbol ever does. A distant clang echoed across the tracks. A shadow moved on the far side of the freight train, something tall, unmoving. Watching. Wren didn't turn, but his jaw tightened. You need to leave the city tonight, he said urgently. Avoid major roads. Do not stay anywhere for more than a few hours. Head north. There is a safe house in Leeds. From there. Connor finished the sentence for him. I go to Ireland. Wren nodded. The Sentinel is the only outlet still outside their control. If you get the ledger to Dublin, it might ignite something big enough that even the Circle can't smother it. Connor exhaled a shaky breath. And if I don't? Wren's voice was barely a whisper. Then Britain goes quietly into the night. Another shadow drifted behind the freight cars. Connor pointed. Is that? Yes, Wren said, already moving. Go. Now. Connor took one last look at the agent. One man against a fractured agency, against an ancient order revived, against a machine that devoured dissent. Wren gave him a small, almost fatherly nod. Stay alive, Connor. Your survival is the only victory we have left. Connor turned and sprinted up the stairs. Behind him, the shadows moved. An MI5 civil war continued quietly in the dark. The car that shouldn't be there. Connor broke into a run the moment he reached street level, turning left, then right, splashing through the rain-slick pavement. Neon signs flickered weakly through the downpour. The air tasted metallic, like the breath of storm clouds scraping the roofs. His path wound through alleys until he reached his block. His flat stood ahead, a squat, damp building with peeling paint and a flickering entry light. But something was wrong. A polished black sedan sat across the street. Engine running, windows tinted to obsidian.no lights. A shape moved in the driver's seat. Connor backed into the shadows between two bins, heart hammering against his ribs. The cold rains licked his hair, ran down his face, soaked his collar. Wren's warning echoed. "You've been marked." He tightened his grip on the dead zone emitter. Stepped into the alley. Found the fire escape, jumped. Pulled himself up. Heart pounding, ankle aching, breath sharp and panicked. He climbed to his balcony, slid through the window. And froze. Someone had been here. The smell hit him first. Not sweat. Not cigarette smoke. Something older, herbal. Earthier, metallic, like crushed leaves and old blood. On the kitchen counter, something waited. A polished black stone holding down a folded sheet of paper. He approached slowly, unfolded it. More ritual symbols, jagged strokes, ancient curvature. And beneath them, "You return to the nest. The tongue of the heron will be cut." The door handle turned behind him. Slowly. Deliberately. Connor's heart fell into his stomach. He grabbed his go-bag from the bedroom, slung it over his shoulder, and moved to the window. The door clicked open. Footsteps. Soft, precise, more than one set. Connor didn't climb down the fire escape. He jumped. His ankle blazed with pain as he hit the pavement, but adrenaline pushed him forward. Shouting behind him, footsteps, the scrape of metal. A figure lunged out of the alley, silhouetted against the rain. "Blackwood," a voice barked. A silenced gunshot hissed through the air and struck the lamppost. He ducked behind a van, breathing ragged, heart slamming, hands trembling. Two shadows approached, moving like predators. He bolted. Limping but fast, zigzagging through puddles. Another alley, another shadow. Two more figures, tattooed necks, eyes like pale glass. A curved ritual blade glinted in the rain. "You walk the path of the marked," one whispered. "We unmake those who see." Connor sprinted in the opposite direction. And collided hard with something solid. An arm grabbed him, yanking him behind a dumpster. "Keep down," a voice hissed. "Agent Wren." He fired twice, quick, surgical. One pursuer dropped. The others scattered into the shadows like feral dogs. Rain pelted them in sheets as Wren dragged Connor through a side alley. They ran until their lungs burned and the shouts had faded into the hiss of rain. Finally, Wren shoved Connor into the alcove of a shuttered shop, both of them dripping and trembling. "You should have left the city already," Wren snapped, his voice tight with fear. "They don't want to just kill you. They want to make an example of you." Connor wiped rain from his eyes. "They were in my flat." "I know," Wren said grimly. "I took what I could before they arrived." He handed Connor a waterproof satchel. "Passport, money, burner phone. Supplies. The rest you'll have to improvise." Connor stared at him, breath ragged. You risked your life for this. Ren didn't look at him. There's no one left in the service who isn't compromised or terrified. You're the last thread of the world we were supposed to protect. Distant sirens echoed. Ren tightened the straps of his coat and pointed down the alley. Safe house in Leeds. One night only. Then Liverpool. Then Ireland. Connor nodded. Ren grabbed his shoulder. And remember this, he whispered. His voice was raw now, almost pleading. Tonight was only the first attempt. They will not stop. They will never stop. Thunder cracked overhead. Connor stepped into the storm. And the hunt continued. Chapter 4, the first attempt on his life. Rain hammered the city so hard it blurred the world into streaks of light and shadow. Cars crawled through the streets like insects trapped beneath glass. The night was a single, unbroken sheet of darkness, the kind where you couldn't tell where the sky ended and the rooftops began. Connor moved quickly through back streets, the waterproof satchel Ren had given him hitting high ship with every step. His ankle throbbed from the jump out the window, but pain was a luxury he didn't have time to acknowledge. Every instinct screamed the same message. They're close, closer than last time. He crossed a narrow bridge over the canal, water foaming below. The wind shifted just enough for him to catch it again, that smell. Burnt greenery, cyan, wet earth. The scent of old rituals, of old forests, impossible things hiding in modern clothes. He ducked into the doorway of an abandoned betting shop, pressed his back against the cold metal and scanned the street. Nothing. But the hair at the base of his neck stood rigid. He wasn't alone. The whisper before the blade. He stepped back into the rain, slowly, cautiously, keeping his hood low. The city around him was dead, pubs shuttered, street lights flickering, taxis nowhere to be seen. Rain fell in sheets that turned to mist as they hit the steaming pavement. A figure leaned casually against the far wall of a closed cafe. Tall, slim, still. Connor's breath hitched. A hood concealed the man's face, but the outline of his jaw caught the street light, pale, almost luminescent, carved like something not meant for city streets. Connor forced his feet to keep moving. Point 1, step, point 2, point 3. The figure lifted his head. Eyes glinted in the dark, not reflective like animal eyes, not human either, cold glass-like, empty. Then he smiled. A small, serene smile that made Connor's stomach twist. "We follow the marked," the man whispered. His voice was soft, almost loving. "The heron walks alone tonight." Lightning flashed, white, jagged, illuminating the man fully for just a second. A tattoo curled up his neck, disappearing beneath his jawline. A thorn circles the radiant thorn. The figure moved. Not lunged, not ran. Vanished, then reappeared a step closer. Connor stumbled backward, heart slamming against his ribs. This wasn't human movement. It was rehearsed, ritual, measured, precise. A predator closing the gap. The man raised something, a curved object that gleamed in the flash of lightning. A blade. Its shape was unlike a knife, older, hooked inward, designed not for cutting but for a making. Connor bolted. The sprint through the back streets. His lungs burned instantly. His ankle howled with pain. But he ran harder than he'd ever run in his life. Behind him, the soft whisper of footsteps followed, quick but unhurried. The sound of someone who knew the chase would end as they wished. He turned a corner into a narrow alley. No way out. A brick wall at the far end. Trapped. He spun around just as the figure entered the alley mouth. Rain fell between them in shimmering curtains. The man tilted his head. "You run from your fate," he whispered. "But the circle always closes." Connor's fingers dug into his coat pocket, the dead zone emitter. He pressed it. A soft pulse, felt more than heard, shivered through the air. The figure stopped mid-step. For the first time, something flickered in those glassy eyes. Not fear. Recognition. Ren must have given him something powerful, something the Circle did not expect in civilian hands. A second passed. Then the man hissed softly, a sound like steam escaping from a cracked furnace. He raised the hook blade slowly. Connor braced. Another shadow dropped from above. A body collided with the attacker, slamming him into the brick wall with impossible force. Agent Ren. MI5's ghost operative. Ren hit the ground with a roll and sprang up in a single fluid movement. His coat was soaked, hair plastered to his forehead, eyes sharp and bright. Move, he barked. Connor didn't hesitate. He squeezed past Ren and sprinted back down the alley. Behind him, the ritualist drew himself upright, his bones making a horrible crackling sound beneath the skin. He moved with renewed fury now, lunging at Ren with the curved blade. Ren ducked under the strike, grabbed the man's wrist, and twisted with brutal precision. The blade clattered to the ground. The attacker screamed, a sound that didn't belong to a human throat. High, jagged, animalistic. Connor spun to look back just as Ren slammed the man's head against the alley wall. Blood sprayed across the rain-wet bricks. But the attacker didn't fall. He lifted his head slowly, smiling through broken teeth. "Children of the Thorn do not die tonight," he hissed. Then, impossibly, he swung his head forward, cracking Ren across the nose with a sickening crunch. Ren staggered backward, dazed. The ritualist reached for his fallen blade. Connor acted on instinct. He grabbed the blade first. Cold too cold. It shocked his palm. The moment he touched it, a whisper slid into his mind, gentle and terrible. "The heron takes up the thorn path." He almost dropped it in horror. The attacker launched himself at him, arms wide, teeth bared, a silent scream carved into his face. Connor swung the curved blade wildly. It sliced across the man's chest. The attacker froze. For the first time, the serene smile faltered. He looked down at the cut, not deep, but precise. Ritual blades were not meant to be wielded by the uninitiated. "You?" he whispered, voice trembling. "You have touched the sacred edge." His eyes widened with awe or fear. Ren, regaining his footing, grabbed the man from behind, wrenching his arms back, and slammed him into the wall again. This time the ritualist slid limply down the bricks. Still breathing. Barely. Ren grabbed Connor's wrist, hard. Drop the blade. Connor did. It clattered onto the wet pavement. Ren kicked it into a drain. Connor gasped for breath. What the hell was that? "Circle enforcer," Ren said, wiping blood from his nose. "Ritually conditioned. Not fully human anymore, not in the psychological sense. They undergo modifications." Connor stared. Modifications. Drugs. Hypnosis. Occult conditioning. Maybe implants. Ren shook his head. The Circle perfects obedience through any means available. The ritualist shuddered on the ground, limbs twitching, trying to rise despite everything. Ren pulled a compact taser from his coat. "Sorry, mate," he muttered. He fired. The attacker convulsed and went still. "Not dead," Ren said quickly. "But down long enough for us to get clear." Connor leaned heavily against the wall, lungs burning. I can't keep outrunning this, Connor gasped. They're everywhere. That's why we're not outrunning anymore, Ren said. We're disappearing. He grabbed Connor's shoulder and pulled him away from the alley. Follow me. Quietly. Eyes down. They moved through the rain-choked streets, sticking to shadows. Ren walked with a limp. Connor saw it. Ren noticed him noticing. Occupational hazard, he said with a tight smile. You learn to limp before you learn to trust. They passed a boarded-up bookshop, a taxi rank, a cluster of recycling bins overflowing with cardboard. Then Ren whistled softly. A moment later, a woman stepped from behind a parked van. Short brown hair, neutral expression, sharp eyes scanning everything. Agent Finch. Connor recognized her from MI5 briefings he wasn't meant to have access to years back, during a different investigation. But she was different now. Somewhere older behind the eyes. She took one glance at Connor, then at Ren's bloody nose, and nodded wordlessly. 3 minutes, she said. Ren gestured. Connor, this is Agent Finch, the only other person in MI5 I'd trust with my own life. Finch, this is the journalist currently derailing Britain's apocalypse. Finch cracked a tight smile. Pleasure. Likewise, Connor murmured. Finch pointed to a car parked under a broken street light, battered Ford, dented, windshield cracked. Get in, she said. We don't have long. The drive through the dying city. The car moved through the rain-drenched streets like a wounded animal. Finch drove with calm precision, eyes flickering constantly between mirrors. Ren sat in the passenger seat, breathing through the pain in his ribs. Connor sat in the back, soaked, trembling, adrenaline still coursing through him. Lights flickered in the distance, police sirens wailed faintly. A power substation hummed and sparked in the rain. Where are we going? Connor asked. Ren turned slightly. To a safe house. Temporary. You rest. You regroup. You disappear at dawn. Finch's voice cut through the quiet. He won't make it to dawn if the circle triangulates us. They won't, Ren said. Dead zone emitters masking our trail for now. For now, Finch echoed grimly. She turned sharply into a narrow service lane, tires splashing through puddles. Connor watched raindrops race each other down the fogged window. The city looked blurred, Andying. Like something poisoned at the root. Why do they want me dead? Connor asked quietly. Ren didn't answer at first. Finch did. It's not personal, she said. It's symbolic. Ren nodded. The circle believes in narratives. Archetypes. Ritual roles. You're the heron, a figure from one of their founding texts. The witness who pierces illusions. That's mythology, Connor snapped. So is the circle, Ren said. Myth is the skeleton. Power is the flesh. Finch slowed the car as they approached a derelict warehouse. Graffiti covered the brickwork. A rusted metal door hung crookedly, battered by years of weather. This is it, she said. The safe house that isn't. They entered through a side door hidden beneath a sheet of corrugated iron. The interior smelled of wet concrete and old motor oil. Dim lights flickered from a portable generator. A table stood in the center of the room, maps, phones. A few medical supplies. 2 duffel bags. Ren dropped heavily into a chair, wincing as he touched his ribs. Finch grabbed a first aid kit and knelt beside him. This is temporary, Finch said without looking at Connor. Very temporary. 10 hours, maximum. Connor glanced around nervously. Is this place secure? As secure as anything gets these days, Ren said. We rotate safe houses hourly. But no place is safe forever. Finch pulled a small camera jammer from her bag and activated it. A faint hum filled the room. Wren leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Rain drummed on the metal roof above them, steady and heavy. "Connor," Wren said softly. "Why did you come back to your flat tonight?" "I needed my notes," Connor said. "Everything for the Dublin handoff is in the ledger files. But there were physical pieces too. Names. Timelines. Things that don't show up in digital metadata." Wren nodded. "Makes sense." Finch shot Connor a hard look. "You walked into a slaughterhouse. That flat wasn't just compromised. It was staged." Connor swallowed. "Staged?" "To scare you," Finch said. "To mark you. To claim you. Ritual theater is part of their psychological playbook." Wren added quietly, "The Circle sees the world as a story. They believe they're the authors. You're the character who defies the script. They need to kill you dramatically. Symbolically, publicly." Connor looked down at his trembling hands. "I'm not a symbol," he murmured. "You're whatever the story needs you to be," Wren replied. "But you can still choose how the chapter ends." Finch stood and checked her watch. "We need to hurry. Connor's extraction begins at dawn." She tossed Connor a dry jacket. "Put that on. You're shaking." He did. For the first time in hours, he felt warmth. But safety, no, that was gone. Wren grunted as Finch taped his cracked ribs. "You all right?" Connor asked. Wren shrugged. "I'll live. Probably." The generator buzzed. Rain thundered. Finch suddenly froze. "Wren," she whispered, "the rain just stopped." The room fell silent. Rain didn't stop like that. Not instantly, not uniformly, not without warning. Wren and Finch exchanged one quick, terrified glance. Then Wren whispered, "They found us." The lights flickered. The shadows on the walls shifted. Something moved outside. Not footsteps. Something larger. The Circle was coming. Chapter 5, The Road North. Chapter 5, The Road North. The lead safe house. The safe house was quiet. Too quiet. Connor sat on the thin cot by the far wall, listening to the slow, irregular hum of the generator in the next room. The air smelled of damp concrete, cold metal, and stale tea, the scent of temporary sanctuary. Finch had left him a towel and a dry jumper, the wool scratched at his neck but felt grounding, almost comforting. Almost. The room was small. Bare. A forgotten office space in a forgotten building, the kind of place that looked like it had died quietly 20 years ago. A single overhead bulb flickered, throwing tired light across the peeling wallpaper. Connor couldn't relax. His leg wouldn't stop bouncing. His fingers shook as they traced the rough edge of the blanket. His thoughts spun like an unbalanced wheel. Aoife's face, the ritualist's eyes. Wren's warning. And always, the whisper beneath it all. "You are marked." He closed his eyes, trying to slow his breathing, but the safe house felt like it was shrinking around him. Every sound became amplified, the pipes groaning, the building settling, someone walking upstairs. Or something. He checked the dead zone emitter in his pocket for the 10th time. Still there, still warm, still humming its soft, protective pulse. He exhaled, shallowed, uneven. Finch entered the room quietly, drying her damp hair with a ragged towel. "You haven't slept," she said, matter of fact. Connor didn't answer. "You need to," she said. "We leave in 3 hours." Connor shook his head. "I can't." Every time I close my eyes I see. He stopped himself. His throat tightened. Finch sat beside him, not close, not intimate, but near enough that he felt tethered back to reality. "They're going to keep coming," Connor said. "Aren't they?" "Yes," Finch said, voice steady. "But you're not alone." Another sound echoed from the hallway, soft, scraping, measured. Finch instantly shifted, hand resting on the grip of her pistol. Connor froze. "What was that?" he whispered. Finch lifted a finger to her lips, listening. Silence. Then a whisper. "Heron." Connor's heart slammed against his ribs. Finch stood slowly, motioning him back. "Stay here," she whispered. "Don't make a sound." "But..." "Connor." Her voice was steel. "Not a sound." She stepped toward the door. The overhead light flickered violently, then died. Darkness consumed the room. Connor sucked in a sharp breath, his hands reaching instinctively for something, anything, real. He clutched the dead zone emitter. A soft chant rose from somewhere outside the safe house walls. Not English, not Latin, older. Moran, Doru, Salen, Herath. Rain began pounding the windows with sudden ferocity. A storm without warning. Finch's voice cut through the dark. "Ren!" The generator sputtered. The chanting grew louder. Connor stood, shaking uncontrollably. "This isn't possible," he whispered to himself. But it was. This was the circle. And they had found him. 2. Breach. The door to the safe house exploded inward with a deafening crack. Connor threw himself behind the cot as splinters sprayed across the room. Figures poured through the doorway, silhouettes in the dark. They moved with unnatural precision, each step measured, ceremonial. Rain dripped from their cloaks, forming a circle around their feet on the concrete. Finch fired 2 shots, precise, controlled. One figure jerked backward, another staggered, but neither fell. Connor's blood turned to ice. Finch shouted, "Move!" He scrambled to the side door that led to the main corridor. A ritualist lunged, blade gleaming in their emergency exit light. Connor ducked on instinct. The blade sliced the air inches above his head. Finch shot the attacker point blank in the throat. He still didn't fall. He simply knelt, smiling, blood pouring down his chest in rhythm with the chanting from outside. "Go!" Finch screamed. Connor bolted down the corridor. The emergency lights flashed red, bathing the hall in stuttering crimson. He stumbled over a fallen desk, catching himself on the peeling wallpaper. Behind him, Finch fought with brutal efficiency, every shot echoing like a heartbeat. But the ritualists pressed forward. And one voice rose above the rest, deeper, older, vibrating the walls. "We unmake the witness." Connor reached the stairwell and threw himself down the steps. The building groaned violently as if something massive pressed against its outer wall. He hit the landing hard. Blood filled his mouth. Pain flared up his side. But he kept moving. 3. The thing outside. He reached the ground floor and hurled himself toward the rear exit. The alley outside was pitch black, rain falling like needles. He pushed on the rusted door handle. Locked. No, 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 no. Behind him, footsteps approached the top of the stairwell. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Then he saw movement through the cracked basement window. Something large. Something vaguely humanoid, but wrong, too tall, too elongated, limbs flickering like shadows caught mid-transition. Lightning lit the alley for one split second. Connor saw its face. No eyes, just carved channels where I should have been. And a mouth stitched shut with wire. The storm slammed back into darkness. Connor stumbled backward, crashing into the wall. What is that? Footsteps approached down the stairs. Finch's voice called. Connor, run! Connor turned just as Finch barreled into him, grabbing his jacket and dragging him away from the door. She shoved him through a side passage. That thing isn't circle, she panted. That's something else. Move! What do you mean something else? Just move. The passage led to a narrow maintenance shaft. Finch kicked open the grate and gestured. In. Connor squeezed inside. Finch followed. Behind them the ritual chanting grew louder, almost ecstatic. From outside, something slammed into the alley door, bending the metal inward with impossible strength. Finch whispered, "Don't breathe." Connor pressed himself deeper into the shaft as the alley door shuddered again. The walls vibrated, dust rained down. The air sizzled like static. Then, silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Finch shifted, her breath warm against his ear. They've lost the trail. How? Finch's expression darkened. You don't want that answer. Escape through the Undercity. They crawled through the shaft until they reached a hatch that opened into a forgotten underpass beneath the building. It smelled of rust and old water. Finch dropped down first, checking the corners with her gun drawn. Clear, she whispered. Connor lowered himself down, landing on broken tiles. The underpass stretched in both directions, lit only by a flickering amber bulb. This connects to the train culvert, Finch said. We follow it. Wren's waiting. Connor hesitated. Where's Wren now? Fighting, she said softly. Or buying us time. She didn't say what he feared or dying. They moved quickly, water sloshing around their shoes. Above them, distant impacts echoed through the pipes. The sound of bodies. The sound of violence, the sound of pursuit that wasn't quite human. Finch touched his sleeve. Connor, she said quietly. Stay with me. He nodded, too exhausted to speak. At the far end of the underpass, a metal ladder led to a street-level service hatch. Finch climbed first, pushing it open a crack and scanning the street with a small mirror. All clear. She pushed the hatch fully open. Connor climbed up after her, into the cold, silent street. The rain had stopped, the shadows felt too still. Finch pointed to a distant set of headlights. There. Wren. A battered Volvo rolled slowly toward them. Connor's shoulders sagged in relief. Thank God, he whispered. The car pulled up. But something was wrong. Wren's hands were gripping the wheel too tightly, his eyes were too wide, his breathing too shallow. Finch approached cautiously. Wren. He looked at her. His pupils were blown wide. His voice shook. They're coming. Finch stiffened. How many? Wren's lips trembled. All of them. Connor felt the night shift, the air tightening. Finch grabbed him. Get in the car. Now. They jumped inside. Wren floored the accelerator. As the car shot forward, Connor looked back through the rear window. The safe house door exploded outward. Silhouettes poured into the street. Too many. Too fast. Too silent. And behind them, The tall, eyeless thing stepped into the road. Finch whispered, "Oh Christ almighty!" Wren slammed the car into a turn. "Hold on." V toward Liverpool. They tore through Leeds, streets becoming a blur of streetlights and wet asphalt. Wren drove like a man possessed, knuckles white, jaw clenched. Connor could barely speak. What was that thing, outside the safe house? Wren shook his head violently. "That wasn't Circle," he said. "That was something they woke." Finch gritted her teeth. "Something old." Connor swallowed. "Old like what?" Finch and Wren exchanged a look, the kind that passed entire histories unspoken. Wren answered reluctantly. "The Circle doesn't just use rituals. They summon things. Bind things. Transform their people. They draw from texts older than Britain itself. Older than Rome. Older than the tribes." Connor felt the world tilt. "They've started using them publicly," Wren said. "That means they're done hiding." Finch nodded. Phase 2. Connor stared out the window at the empty motorways leading north. "Where are we going?" "Liverpool," Wren said. "You'll cross from there." Connor shook his head, exhausted and terrified. "I can't keep outrunning this." Finch reached back from the passenger seat and gripped his hand, firm, grounding. "You're not outrunning them," she said. "Not anymore." Her eyes hardened. "You're surviving them." The car sped into the night. They ended not with safety, but with determination. Connor was still alive. And as long as he breathed, the truth breathed with him. Chapter 6: Car Chase Through Liverpool. The motorway to nowhere. The motorway stretched ahead like a long, wet scar through the night. Headlamps cut twin tunnels through the darkness as Wren floored the accelerator, sending the battered Volvo shuddering forward. Rain hammered the windscreen so hard it sounded like gravel. Connor sat in the back seat, heart refusing to slow. His limbs trembled with aftershocks of adrenaline, every muscle felt tight enough to snap. Wren didn't speak, Finch didn't speak. The only sound was the engine straining and the tires hissing across waterlogged tarmac. Connor finally broke the silence. "Wren, what did you see back there? Before we got into the car?" Wren swallowed hard. His voice was hoarse. "I saw something no one in MI5 is trained to understand." Finch glanced at him. "Was it one of them?" Wren nodded rigidly. "A ritual guardian. Something they only summon when they consider a threat existential." "Summon?" Connor said. "Like, actually bring forth?" Wren's jaw tightened. "If you think the Circle only deals in knives and data, you haven't been paying attention." Finch added quietly, "They blend the old with the new. Ritual with infrastructure. Myth with machinery." Connor stared at the motorway racing past. "And they're using that to hunt me." Wren's knuckles whitened around the steering wheel. "They won't stop now. Connor, this is no longer a manhunt, it's a crusade." The word chilled him more than the storm. 2. The first pursuer. They had been driving for nearly an hour when Finch stiffened. "Wren," she said, eyes narrowing at the side mirror. "We're being followed." Connor turned. A pair of headlights glowed in the distance, far behind them, too far to see the vehicle, but too steady to be casual traffic. Then the lights flickered twice. A signal. Wren muttered a curse. "They found us already." Finch leaned back toward Connor. "Keep your head down." The Volvo picked up speed, engine growling. Wren weaved between lanes, but the trailing vehicle mirrored every shift, slow at first, then faster. Finch examined the mirror again. They're closing. Black SUV. Reinforced bumper. Looks modified. How many? Wren asked. 3, maybe 4 inside. Connor clenched his jaw. Circle. Finch nodded. Guaranteed. Wren slammed his foot down. The Volvo lurched forward. The SUV matched the acceleration instantly. Persistent bastards, Wren growled. Finch reached beneath her seat, pulling out a compact submachine pistol. They're not letting us reach Liverpool without a fight. Connor, so what do we? A flash glinted from the SUV's roof. Finch shouted, down! A suppressed round sliced through the night and punched straight through the back window, glass exploding like ice. Connor ducked instinctively as shards rained over him. The SUV surged closer. Wren swerved violently, avoiding a second round. Finch unlatched her window. Cover your ears. She leaned out into the roaring wind and fired a controlled burst. The bullets pinged off the SUV's armored front like rain. Told you, she yelled. Armored. The SUV closed the gap. 20 meters, 15.10. Then it rammed them. The entire Volvo jolted. Connor slammed into the seat in front, breath ripped out of his lungs. Brace! Wren yelled. The SUV rammed again, harder. The Volvo fishtailed across the road. Rain screeching metal, shattering glass. Connor grabbed the headrest in front of him, knuckles white. Finch screamed at Wren, hold it. Wren gritted his teeth. I'm trying. He wrestled the wheel, bringing the car back into alignment just in time for the SUV to ram them a third time. This time the blow spun the Volvo sideways. Wren fought the skid, but physics won. The Volvo spun in a violent arc and slammed into the crash barrier. Connor's vision blurred. A high-pitched ringing flooded his ears. The world tilted. Wren groaned. Finch spat blood. The SUV slowed, headlights steady, deliberate. Its doors opened. Silhouette stepped out, tall, hooded, moving with ritualistic calm. Finch raised her weapon, gasping, Wren, move us. Wren wiped blood from his lip and shoved the car into reverse. The engine sputtered, then roared. The Volvo shot backward. One of the hooded figures leapt aside. Another didn't. The impact tossed him over the bonnet like a rag doll. Connor flinched, but the figure stood up immediately, neck twisting unnaturally. Wren swore. They're dosed with something. Or conditioned. Or both. Finch yelled, go forward. Wren spun the wheel and accelerated. The Volvo shot past the stunned ritualist. The SUV revved, turning to pursue. Finch screamed, 5 miles. That's all we need. We reach Liverpool outskirts and they lose surveillance. Wren nodded, jaw set. Connor clung to the seat. We're not going to make it, are we? Finch didn't look back. We'd better. 3. The edge of the city. By the time they reached the industrial ring roads around Liverpool, the Volvo was practically disintegrating. Windshield cracked, tires bald, back window gone, engine overheating. But it still moved. And so did the SUV. The chase became a dance of death between abandoned warehouses and shipping depots. The storm raged overhead, lightning illuminating the industrial sprawl in stuttering flashes. Finch shouted, left! That gate! Wren and Finch had worked together long enough to operate almost instinctively. Wren swerved through a half-open chain-link gate, sparks flying as the metal scraped the side of the Volvo. Behind them, the SUV plowed straight through the gate, ripping it from its hinges. Connor screamed, "Where the hell are we going?" Finch pointed ahead. "The docks." "The docks are crawling with." "Exactly," she snapped. "Cameras. Security. Civilians. They can't be ritualistic in public. They need the shadows." Ren muttered, "That won't stop them forever." The SUV gained again. Then something new happened. Another set of headlights appeared from the side road. This car was unmarked, sleek, low to the ground. It skidded sideways in front of the SUV, blocking it. The driver stepped out in one fluid motion, firing as he moved. The SUV stalled under the hail of bullets. Connor blinked in shock. "Who the?" Finch's voice cracked with relief. "That's our driver." Ren floored the accelerator. They raced past the second vehicle. The driver dove back inside his car, spun it around, and followed. Within seconds he overtook them and led the way. Finch tapped her earpiece. "Declan sent you." A voice crackled back, "Aye, and ye owe me a pint." Connor blinked. "Declan, that Declan." Finch nodded. "He's our link to the ferry extraction." The SUV reappeared around the corner, smoking but functional. The driver accelerated. "Move. Last stretch." For the ferry terminal. The docks emerged from the rain like a city of steel skeletons, cranes towering, floodlights flickering, containers stacked like tombs. An old cargo ferry sat at the end of a loading ramp, dark, unlit, awaiting only them. The driver shouted, "Go! I'll keep them off you." He slammed his car sideways into the path of the SUV. The two vehicles collided and spun. Connor didn't look back. Ren drove up the ramp toward the vessel's open mouth. Finch shouted, "Faster!" The SUV broke free, swerving onto the ramp. Connor screamed, "Ren!" The Volvo launched onto the ferry deck. Metal grated, tires burst, the hood crumpled. The SUV raced up the ramp after them. Finch fired backwards, round after round. The ferry engines rumbled. Someone unseen was already casting off. The ramp began to lift. The SUV accelerated harder. Ren yelled, "Hold on!" The SUV hit the rising ramp and sailed through the air like a missile. It smashed onto the deck just meters from them. Connor stumbled out of the Volvo, coughing. Finch grabbed him and dragged him behind a container. The SUV doors burst open. Ritualists spilled out. Silent. Smiling. Blades in hand. The ferry horn bellowed. Declan's voice echoed across the deck, "We're moving, fight or die." Lightning split the sky. The first ritualist lunged. The burning ferry. Finch shot the attacker mid-lunge, 2 rounds to the chest, 1 to the neck. He fell but didn't stop moving. Ren tackled another ritualist into the railing. Connor ducked behind a container. He could hear it again, that chant. Soft, serene, ancient. It seeped between the containers like smoke. Herath, Moran, Eluan, Heron, Heron. Connor's breath caught. They were calling him. Finch shouted, "Connor, get back!" He snapped to attention just as a third ritualist appeared, blade drawn. Connor stumbled away, slipping on rain-slick metal. The blade slashed downward. A bullet hit the ritualist square in the temple, sending him sprawling. Finch grabbed Connor's arm. "Move!" "Where?" "The lifeboats!" Explosions echoed across the deck, Declan's men fighting back with small arms. A ritualist climbed atop a container, raising his arms, chanting louder. The air shimmered around him. Lightning hit the mast above. The ferry lurched violently. Finch dragged Connor through the chaos. Bullets sparked. Blades flashed. Ritual chants rose like a storm of voices. Connor and Finch reached the lifeboat station. Ren sprinted toward them, blood on his face. Go! Another ritualist leapt from a railing like an animal. Ren fired once, a perfect shot, sending him tumbling into the sea. Finch jumped into the lifeboat. Connor followed. Ren slashed the release rope with a combat knife. Ren, get in! Connor screamed. Ren hesitated. The ferry deck was swarming with robed figures. Declan's voice shouted in the distance, "Geo! Get him out!" Ren locked eyes with Connor. "Live," he said. "Make this worth it." He cut the final rope. The lifeboat dropped. Connor screamed his name. Ren was gone. The ritualists surged toward the edge of the deck. Finch yanked the engine cord. The lifeboat roared to life. They shot into the storm. Behind them the ferry burned, flames licking through the darkness, bodies moving against orange light. Connor watched with tears blurring his vision. "Ren," he whispered. Finch put a hand on his shoulder. "He bought us time," she said. "Make it count." The storm swallowed them whole. The burning glow of the ferry faded. And Britain disappeared behind a wall of dark and rain, a dying kingdom preparing for the apocalypse. Chapter 7, Ghosts Upon the Water. The storm. The sea was a heaving sheet of black muscle, rising and falling like the breath of a sleeping giant beneath the lifeboat. Waves slapped the hull, each impact sending tremors through the craft. Rain amid the flimsy canopy, blurring the world into a smear of white noise and darkness. Finch gripped the engine cord with white-knuckled determination, keeping the lifeboat pointed toward the faintest outline of horizon. Connor crouched beside her beneath the canopy, drenched, shivering, every breath visible in the cold night air. Lightning split the sky again, illuminating walls of rolling water on both sides. The wind howled like something living. Finch shouted over the gale. "Stay low! Hold on to something!" Connor clung to the frame of the lifeboat as another wave smashed against them. Salt stung his. His pulse hammered. Behind them, the burning ferry shrank into the darkness, a distant orange scar on the black water. It felt like watching a world die. Finch adjusted the throttle, face set with steely concentration. Even soaked, battered, exhausted, she moved with a confidence Connor clung to like a rope thrown to a drowning man. He pulled the waterproof satchel closer. Inside it were everything that mattered. The ledger, the last physical notes, a burner phone, hard copies of Connor's investigative trail, a few photographs, a passport. A life compressed into the weight of a small bag. Finch saw him staring at it and shouted, "Don't lose that. If we die out here, someone's still going to find it." Connor blinked the rain from his eyes. "We're not going to die." Finch didn't answer. The sea did. Another wave hit. The lifeboat rose sharply, then slammed down hard. Connor fell forward, cracking his knee against the seat. Pain shot through his leg. Finch grabbed his collar and yanked him up. "Stay with me, Connor. Stay awake." "I'm awake," he murmured, but his voice sounded distant to his own ears. Too quiet, a part of his mind whispered, "You're going into shock." He tasted blood from where he wasn't sure. The storm felt different now. Not natural. Not random. Every gust of wind felt directed, every wave felt timed. as if something beneath the water wanted them deeper into the night. 2. Shadows on the waves. Lightning boomed again. For a split second, the sea lit up as bright as day. And Connor saw shapes in the water. Not boats, not debris, and not whales. Human silhouettes, standing motionless on the surface of the waves, tall, thin, hooded. Impossible. Connor's breath caught in his throat. When the lightning faded, the shapes vanished, swallowed by darkness. But when the next flash came, there they were again. Closer. Finch didn't see them, she was too busy steering through the waves. Connor tried to speak, but the words stuck. He blinked rain out of his eyes. Another flash. Closer still. Now he could see details. Cloaks made of water, as if the waves themselves formed their garments. Heads bowed. Arms stretched outward. Their faces obscured, but their bodies unnaturally still, untouched by the storm. Connor whispered, "Finch." "What?" she shouted. He hesitated. If he said it, it became real. Nothing. She gave him a strange look, then turned back to the wheel. Connor pressed both palms against his temples. Hallucinations, shock, stress, trauma. But deep inside, another voice whispered, "You know what they are." A wave hit the bow and drenched him in freezing water. Connor gasped and wiped his face, swallowing hard. Finch leaned close, hair plastered to her skull. "We're about 20 minutes out," she shouted. "If the engine holds." "What about the circle?" "They won't risk helicopter pursuit in this weather. And their boats aren't built for storms. That's why we're out here now." Connor nodded. The shapes disappeared again. But the sea felt wrong, unnaturally calm beneath the howling wind, as if something controlled the storm from below. He clutched the satchel to his chest. "If we die," he said, voice shaking, "this all dies with us." Finch met his eyes. "We're not dying tonight." But she didn't sound convinced. 3. The Heron's Omen. The storm suddenly broke. No fading. No easing. 1 second thunder roared above them, the next, eerie silence swallowed the world. Finch tensed. "That's not right." Connor's stomach flipped. What happened? Storms don't just switch off. The sea went flat. Perfectly flat. The air stilled. Even the rain stopped midfall, a few last drops landing softly on the hull before the sky went quiet. Finch shuddered. "We're in the eye." Connor looked around. Nothing but the vast black sea. But something was wrong. The water's surface was too smooth. Too reflective. Like a mirror stretched infinitely. Then he saw it. A single heron, standing on a floating scrap of broken timber. Its feathers stark white against the dark water, its eyes fixed on him. Connor's breath hitched. Finch murmured, "What the hell?" The bird didn't move. Didn't blink. It simply watched. Connor clutched the sides of the lifeboat, heartbeat thundering in his ears. Finch whispered, "Connor, is that?" "Yes," he whispered. "I think it is." The heron spread its wings slowly, almost ceremonially. And as it did, the smooth water beneath it rippled. Words formed on the surface. Not written, not carved, reflected, like the sky itself was whispering through the water. Connor leaned forward involuntarily. He couldn't help it. The ripples coalesced into letters. Heron. 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 A single drop of water fell from the heron's beak. It hit the sea. And the storm returned instantly. The waves rose like mountains, the wind screamed, the sea turned violent. The heron vanished in the chaos. Finch slammed the throttle. Hold on. For the last pursuit. They fought the storm for what felt like an hour. Connor's arms felt like rubber. His legs barely responded. His muscles burned with each new impact. But Finch refused to slow down. Almost there, she shouted. I see. Lightning flashed. Connor's stomach dropped. A dark silhouette emerged from the wave crest behind them. A small speedboat. Black, angular, fast. Circle hunters. Rain stung Connor's skin like needles as he stared in disbelief. How the hell? They follow wet storm, Finch shouted. The same way they follow blood. Connor felt sick. What do we do? Finch reached into a side compartment and pulled out a flare gun. What's that going to do? Everything, she said, loading it. The speedboat gained rapidly, cutting through waves with unnatural stability. One of the hooded figures stood at the bow, arms extended, chanting into the wind. Connor felt the chant in his skull. It vibrated in his teeth. His vision blurred. They're trying to call you to the water. Finch fired the flare. The red streak arced beautifully across the night and struck the speedboat's fuel tank. A column of flame erupted. The speedboat swerved violently. The chanting figure fell into the sea. The vessel spun in a wide, burning arc before disappearing behind a wave. Finch didn't celebrate. We're nearly there, she gasped. Connor squinted ahead. In the distance, a faint glow shimmered along the horizon. City lights. Ireland. His breath caught. We made it. Finch said nothing. She was too focused on navigating the final stretch through the violent swells. Landfall. By the time the lifeboat scraped against the rocky Irish coastline, Connor was barely conscious. The world swayed around him. Cold, dark rain. He stumbled onto the slick rocks and collapsed to his knees, coughing seawater. Finch hauled the satchel out behind him, slinging it across her shoulder. You're not passing out yet, she said harshly. We're not safe. Connor blinked rain from his eyes. But we're here. Finch scanned the cliffs with narrowed eyes. No. We're alive. There's a difference. Two figures appeared at the top of the incline, flashlights aimed down. A voice called Finch? That you? Finch sagged with relief. Ronan. Thank fuck. Ronan waved them forward. Come on then. We've got a car waiting. Finch pulled Connor to his feet. They climbed the rocky incline. Ronan grabbed Connor by the arm. Christ, lad. You look like a corpse. Connor managed a weak whisper. Feels accurate. Ronan laughed once, a harsh bark, then helped him over the final ledge. Behind them, thunder cracked. The three of them froze. Another crack, louder. Not thunder. A gunshot. Finch shouted, down. Ronan shoved Connor to the ground. Another shot rang out. A figure appeared at the ridge behind them, tall, hooded, carrying a long rifle. Finch fired twice. The figure fell. Silence returned. Ronan spat. They're already here? Jesus Christ. Finch grabbed Connor. Move. They ran toward a waiting jeep. Connor stumbled into the back seat. As Ronan floored the accelerator, the jeep roared down the coastal road, tires skidding across the wet asphalt. Connor looked back at the shoreline. The sea churned violently. Lightning flashed. For an instant, he saw the heron standing on a jagged rock, watching him leave. And as Ronan sped toward Dublin, Connor whispered to himself, "I'm not meant to survive this." Finch heard him. "Yes, you are," she said quietly. "Because if you don't, none of us will." The jeep tore through the storm, toward a country that would give Connor sanctuary, and take it from him violently, only hours later. Ireland welcomed him. And Ireland would betray him. But not yet. Tonight, the heron lived. Chapter 8: The Irish Refuge. Into Dublin's veins. Dublin at night was a strange mix of sanctuary and ghostlight. Ronan's jeep cut through the slick roads, tires hissing on wet asphalt. Street lamps glowed through mist, casting long, wavering shadows across Georgian facades and cobblestone streets. Neon signs flickered outside empty pubs. Rain drummed a steady rhythm on the roof. Connor sat slumped in the back seat, wrapped in a wool blanket Ronan had shoved at him. Every bone in his body ached. Salt crusted his hair. His clothes felt like lead. His mind drifted between shock and lucid terror. Finch sat beside him, alert despite her exhaustion, scanning alleys, rooftops, reflections in puddles. Ronan drove like he was being chased even when they weren't, eyes flicking between mirrors, jaw set hard. "You sure we lost them?" Connor croaked. Ronan didn't look back. "No one crosses the damn Irish Sea in that weather and lives," he said. "Except ye apparently." Finch wasn't convinced. Connor could hear it in her voice. "They won't stop because of a little drowning hazard." Ronan grunted. "We've eyes across the coast. If any Circle lads came through, we'd know." Connor met Finch's gaze. "Would we?" Her silence was answer enough. The jeep crested a small hill overlooking the Liffey. Dublin shimmered beneath them, a dark mosaic of wet rooftops, pale streetlights, and 1,000 hushed stories. It should have felt like refuge. It didn't. The city seemed watchful. As if it knew something was coming. "Where are we going?" Connor asked. Ronan shifted gears. "To meet the woman who'll publish your ledger. Aoife Brennan. If anyone can get this out, it's her." Finch nodded. "Aoife is old school. Hard as iron. Smart as hell. And the only editor in Europe not compromised." "And the only one mad enough to take us in," Ronan muttered. Connor clutched the waterproof satchel to his chest. "The truth survives," he whispered. Finch placed a hand on his shoulder, solid, grounding. "If we make it to Aoife," she said, "it just might." 2. The Sentinel Office. Ronan parked outside a nondescript 3-story building near Merrion Square. The sign above the door had once said the Sentinel in brass letters, but the rain had dulled them to a tarnished grey. Finch stepped out first, scanning the street. Ronan followed, hand on the concealed pistol beneath his jacket. Connor limped behind them, leaning heavily on the satchel as if it were a crutch. The building's ground floor hummed faintly with the noise of computers, printers, and late-night journalism, the kind of chaotic quiet that only exists in newsrooms where truth is still hunted like a wild animal. Ronan pushed the buzzer. A metallic click echoed. The door swung open. A woman in her 60s stood there with arms crossed, a severe expression on her lined face, and eyes sharp enough to cut glass. Aoife Brennan. Her hair was a silver halo tied back in a practical knot. Her posture was upright, military in its precision. She radiated authority, the kind earned through decades of staring down governments. She looked at Connor as if sizing up a ghost. "You're Blackwood," she said, her accent firm, Dublin through and through. "Yes," Connor whispered. "You look half dead." "Closer to 80%. Aoife snorted. Well, come in then. She stepped aside. Ronan slapped Connor's back gently. Told you she was a charmer. Aoife shot Ronan a warning look. And you smell like seawater and gunpowder. Get in before someone sees ye. They entered the newsroom. It was cramped, cluttered, warm, a welcome contrast to the cold terror outside. Papers were scattered across every surface. Old mugs filled the sink. Corkboards were pinned with red string, photos, maps, and sticky notes. The hum of printing presses echoed faintly from the basement. Aoife shut the blinds. Then she turned to Connor. Show me what's worth killing half of Britain to keep quiet. Connor lowered himself into a chair and opened the satchel. He pulled out the encrypted drive, the notes, the photocopies. Aoife's eyes widened slightly. She sat at the desk opposite him, clasping her hands. Finch leaned against the wall. Ronan paced near the window. Connor spread the papers out. This, he said quietly, is Operation Vision Stream. Aoife scanned the first few pages. Her face went pale. Then hard. Then horrifyingly still. Holy Mother of God. Connor nodded. Aoife read further. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe. She whispered, "This is genocide." Finch said, "It's worse. It's ritualized." Aoife's eyes snapped to her. "Explain." Connor spoke softly, voice raw. The circle of the radiant thorn. They've been embedded in government for decades. Longer. They use political infrastructure as ritual apparatus. Data systems as altars. Implants as binding symbols. Aoife stared at him for a long moment. Then she said, "I believe you." Connor exhaled shakily, the first sliver of relief he'd felt in days. Aoife stood and walked toward the far window, staring out into the night. Then she said, "We need to go to the safe room. Now." 3. The safe room. The safe room was a retrofitted basement chamber behind two reinforced steel doors. It smelled of old paper, ink, and dust, with the scent of secrets preserved. Aoife flicked on the lights. A long oak table sat in the middle. Shelves lined the walls, filled with files dating back decades, radios, encrypted rigs, and an old typewriter sat on a side desk. Aoife locked both steel doors. "Right," she said. "Talk. All of you." Finch leaned forward. "The British state is compromised. Every intelligence service. Every broadcaster. Every official communications channel. You are the last independent press that can publish this without being neutralized." Aoife nodded. "I know." And, Finch added, "You will be killed for it." Aoife didn't flinch. "Journalists die," she said simply. "Truth doesn't." Connor swallowed. "We need to publish the ledger tonight." Aoife shook her head. "We need to corroborate it tonight. If we publish half-baked, they'll paint you as hysterical. We do this the right way." Connor clenched his fists. "Aoife, they killed people. They hunted us. They're in London. They on the ferry. There." "I know." Her voice softened. "I know, lad. But if we rush this, they win." Finch glanced at Connor. "She's right." Connor bowed his head. Aoife placed a hand on his shoulder. "Let us do our job. You've done yours." Ronan cracked open a beer somewhere behind them. The sound of the tab popping echoed like a gunshot in the safe room. Aoife turned to Finch. "You're sure they can't track him?" Finch hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. "No," she admitted. "But they're hours behind. Maybe. Maybe. The word hung like a blade. Aoife straightened. Get some tea into ye. Sit down. You can stay here a few hours. Then we'll move you. Connor slumped into a chair. Exhaustion crashed over him like a wave. Finch stood guard near the door. Ronan loaded his pistol. Aoife sat across from Connor, reading line after line of the ledger with the stony composure of a war-hardened general. Finally, Connor let his eyes close. For the first time in 2 days, sleep took him. 4. Dream of the heron. Connor dreamed. Not of the ferry, not of the circle, not of the death that stalked him. He dreamed of a dark lake beneath a starlit sky. Mist curled across the water. A lone heron stood at the center, perched on a broken tree branch submerged just beneath the surface. Its eyes glinted silver. It called to him, and not with sound, but with presence. You are not prey, you are witness, you are the blade that sees. Connor stepped into the lake. The water rippled outward with symbols, ancient spirals and knots, glowing faintly beneath the surface. The heron spread its wings. You are the one they fear. Connor reached out to touch its feathers. And woke with a jolt. V'd betrayal in the morning. Light seeped through the blinds. Morning. Soft, quiet, too quiet. Finch was gone. Ronan was gone. Aoife sat slumped in her chair, snoring softly. Connor stood slowly. The safe room was sealed as still. But something felt wrong. He walked to the steel door. Pressed his ear to it. Silence. He turned. Aoife shifted in her seat. You're up, she murmured, rubbing her eyes. Where's Finch? Connor asked. Aoife blinked. Out looking for breakfast. And Ronan? Went to check the perimeter. Connor forced a smile. Right. But the unease grew. He sat back down, staring at the ledger spread across the table. Aoife sipped from her mug. We're getting somewhere. I think. A sharp, metallic click echoed from outside the safe room. Then silence. Aoife froze. Her eyes widened. How many doors did you lock last night? 2, Connor whispered. Aoife swallowed. That was a third. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Coming down the basement corridor. Connor's chest tightened. Aoife. She stood abruptly, pushing him behind her. Move. Connor backed toward the far wall. The steel door handle twitched, just slightly. Then stopped. Aoife reached beneath the table and pulled out a shotgun. Connor's breath caught. You armed your newsroom basement. She shrugged. You haven't worked in Irish journalism long, have ye? The handle twitched again. This time harder. Aoife raised the shotgun. Connor's heartbeat thundered. The handle turned. Slowly. Impossibly slowly. The steel door creaked open. Aoife fired. The blast echoed like thunder. A figure stumbled backward into the corridor. Aoife pumped the shotgun. Again. Connor screamed. She fired a second shot. A third. Smoke filled the room. Footsteps echoed, retreating. Then. A voice. Cold. Familiar. Heron. Aoife's face drained of color. Connor shook. No, no, they can't be here. We're in Ireland. They can't. "We have to move," Aoife said urgently. "Now." She grabbed the ledger files. The steel door shuddered violently. Bent inward. With impossible strength. Connor staggered back. Aoife grabbed his arm. "Run." And so began the fall of Dublin. Chapter 9: The Killing of Aoife Brennan. Ein breach. The steel door shuddered again, a violent, resonant clang that echoed through the safe room like a church bell struck by a war hammer. Aoife grabbed Connor by the forearm and pulled him toward the second exit, a narrow service corridor that led deeper into the building. The air vibrated with every impact against the door behind them. "They found us," Aoife rasped. "They can't be in Ireland," Connor whispered, breath shaking. "They don't have reach here yet." "Does it look like they lack reach?" Aoife snapped. The safe room lights flickered. Another boom, the steel door bent inward, forming a grotesque inward bulge, as if something monstrous was trying to push through. Aoife shoved Connor into the corridor. "Keep moving. Don't look back." Connor staggered into the tight hallway, palms scraping rough brick as he caught himself. The hallway smelled of old ink and mold, the scent of a building that had lived through too many generations of secrets. Behind him, Aoife fired her shotgun again. The blast was deafening in the enclosed space. Then a scream, not human, not natural. A guttural, wet hiss that raised the hair on Connor's arms. He spun around. Through the smoke he saw a figure at the breached doorway, tall. Hooded. The edges of its robe soaked in blood. Ronan's blood? Finch's blood? He didn't know. The figure stepped forward, slow, ritualistic. Aoife fired again. And again. The fifth shot sent the hooded figure sprawling backward. "Aoife," Connor gasped, reaching for her. "Run!" She slammed the second steel door closed and dropped the locking bolt. The door boomed instantly as something slammed against it. Connor stumbled down the corridor, heart hammering. The air vibrated with whispered chanting, a language he didn't know but felt in his bones. Old, ancient, druidic. The circle's tongue. The corridor opened into the printing floor, rows of inactive machines looming like skeletal beasts in the dim red emergency lighting. Paper rolls stacked to the ceiling cast long shadows. Ronan burst out from between two stacks, gun drawn and bleeding from the temple. "Where's Aoife?" he panted. "In the corridor," Connor cried. "She's holding them back." Ronan shoved past him. "No," he whispered. "Not her. Not her." 2. The Fall of the Sentinel. Aoife Brennan did not go quietly. As the hooded figure surged against the door, she fired through the topmost corner where a hinge is trained under pressure. Buckshot ripped into the first figure. The second. The third. Her breaths came sharp, steady. She was no stranger to violence. She'd lived through the Troubles, through bomb scares, through scandals that sent governments crashing. But this was different. She wasn't just fighting criminals. She was fighting myth. A final slam bent the door inward. A black-gloved hand reached through the gap. She swung the shotgun like a club and broke the wrist with a crack that echoed. The chant grew louder. She fired again. The hallway filled with smoke. Then a whisper curled through the air, soft, serpentine. "Brennan?" She froze. That voice. It didn't belong to one person, it sounded like it belonged to dozens. Lead. Harmonized, ancient. Her blood ran cold as the door gave way. The hooded figure stepped through. Tall, robed, tattooed from jaw to chest in spirals and runic knots. His eyes were pale, unnaturally so, glowing faintly in the emergency lights. He looked at her with something approaching reverence. "You cannot halt prophecy," he whispered. Aoife's jaw tightened. "Prophecy my arse." She fired point blank. 3. Rooftop flight. The printing floor door burst open and Aoife stumbled in, coughing from smoke and dust. Connor grabbed her arm. "Run! We have to go." She shoved him forward. "This way." Ronan fired 2 shots behind them. They sprinted through a maze of old conveyor belts and loading pallets until they reached an iron stairwell. "Up!" Aoife shouted. They climbed, feet pounding metal, as figures poured into the printing hall below. The chanting returned, louder now, echoing up the stairwell like a rising tide. They reached the rooftop door. Ronan kicked it open. A cold wind hit them as they stepped onto the roof, rain slicing sideways, clouds thick and low over Dublin. The city below glittered, oblivious to the war unfolding above it. Aoife pointed across the rooftops. "We move now. Stick together." Her sentence cut short. A faint glint. A flash of silver from a rooftop opposite. Ronan saw it first. "Down!" He tackled Connor to the ground. The rifle cracked. Aoife gasped. Connor turned just in time to see her stagger, hand flying to her chest. Blood blossomed through her coat. "Aoife!" Connor screamed. Ronan dragged him back. "Stay down!" Another crack. A bullet tore through the ventilation unit beside them. Aoife tried to speak, lips trembling, but only blood came out. She fell to her knees, gripping the edge of a chimney stack for support. The shooter's scope glinted again. Finch erupted through the rooftop door behind them like an avenging force, firing 3 shots toward the opposite building. "Move," she roared. "They've got a sniper and ground teams." Ronan grabbed Aoife, who was barely conscious, and pulled her toward cover. Connor scrambled beside him. Aoife blinked up at him, tears pooling. "Connor, lad." He held her hand. Her grip was weak. "Don't." She choked. "Don't let them bury it." The 3rd shot hit. Connor felt Aoife jolt, like a puppet whose string snapped. Her body slumped. Ronan shouted. Finch screamed something unintelligible. Connor dropped beside her. "Aoife? Aoife! Stay with me." But her eyes had already glazed. Her chest stilled. Her last breath rose as mist into the Dublin rain. Connor collapsed inward. The woman who could have saved the story, who could have printed the ledger, who believed in him, was gone. Finch grabbed his arm. "Connor, we have to go. Now!" Ronan fired another volley toward the opposite rooftop. The chanting grew louder from below. The circle had reached the roof. 4. The hunter in the rain. Finch dragged Connor toward the edge of the roof. "Ladder," she shouted over the storm. A thin fire escape descended to the alley below. Connor hesitated, eyes locked on Aoife's still form. She looked peaceful now. As if she'd known exactly how her fate would play out. "Connor, move!" Finch screamed, voice cracking. He forced himself over the rail and descended. Rain stung his face. The alley below seemed 100 miles away. Ronan fired more shots, covering their retreat. Finch slid down the ladder like a ghost. They hit the ground and sprinted. Ronan leapt down last, landing in a roll. But something landed behind him. Hard. Heavy. Something not human. Connor turned. A hooded figure, pale-eyed, tattooed, dropped from the rooftop with the grace of a predator. Ronan fired point-blank. The bullet hit the figure's chest. He barely flinched. Ronan's eyes widened. "Go," he shouted. "Both of you." The robed man lunged. Ronan tackled him, slamming him into the wall. Bones cracked. The figure twisted Ronan's wrist with impossible strength. Ronan screamed. "Run," he roared. Finch dragged Connor around the corner. Connor looked back. The hooded figure lifted Ronan by the throat and Connor didn't see the end. Finch turned him away. "Don't look," she whispered. "Don't remember him like that." Connor broke. A sob tore from him. Ronan, Declan's men, Graham, everyone he touched died. And he was still alive. Why? The vanishing point. Finch and Connor sprinted through narrow alleys, slipping between bins and dodging locked gates. Dublin blurred around them, ancient brick, graffiti, mist, rain. They made it to the river. Finch flagged a passing motorcyclist, a courier, and flashed a Garda badge she'd kept for emergencies. "Urgent police business," she snapped. "We need the bike." The man stared, confused, nervous. Then he saw the blood on Connor's clothes and the terror in his eyes. He handed over the keys without a word. Finch mounted the bike. "Connor, on." He wrapped his arms around her waist. She gunned the engine. The bike roared. They shot into the streets like lightning, weaving through morning traffic, past the quays, across bridges, through side streets only a local would know. Behind them, faint at first, came the sound of tires screaming. Pursuers. Then chanting. Carried on the rain. Connor buried his face in Finch's shoulder, shaking uncontrollably. Aoife's last words echoed through him. "Don't let them bury it." Finch spoke over the wind. "Connor, listen to me. The ledger doesn't die with her. It doesn't die with any of us. This isn't over." He didn't answer. But something stirred in him. Something old. Something heron-shaped. A blade of truth rising. 6th across the border. Finch didn't stop until they reached the outskirts of County Louth, roads growing emptier, fields stretching wide, the rain easing into mist. They pulled into an abandoned farmhouse. Finch killed the engine. For several minutes, neither spoke. Finally, Connor whispered. "She's dead." Finch bowed her head. She was one of the best. Her voice cracked. She didn't deserve that. Connor clenched his fists. "They killed her because she believed in me." "They killed her because she was dangerous to them," Finch said. He looked at her, hollow-eyed. "What do we do now?" Finch stood. "We go back to Britain." Connor stared. "Back?" "It's the only place we have allies left," Finch said. "Wren's network. The dissidents still hiding in MI5. If we can get you to London, we can find a way to publish. Or leak. Or broadcast something." Connor shivered. He was exhausted, traumatized, broken. But he nodded. Finch squeezed his shoulder. "You're not done, Connor. You're the only one who can finish this." "What am I?" he whispered. "A journalist," she said. But in her eyes, he saw she believed something more. Something mythic. 7. The Blood Oath. They reached the Irish border by nightfall, using smuggler routes Declan had arranged long ago. They crossed unnoticed through abandoned sheds and unused cattle paths. As they stepped into Northern Ireland's muddy fields, Finch turned to Connor. "We honor her," she said. Aoife's face flared in Connor's mind. "We honor all of them," he whispered. Finch nodded. "Through the truth." Connor swallowed. I swear I won't let this die. Not now. Not ever." Finch held out her hand. He took it. Their oath, unspoken but iron, bound them both. Then they walked toward the smuggler-safe house. Toward their next hell. And behind them, far in the distance, Dublin's skyline flickered. First a glitch. Then a pulse. Then a blackout. The circle was already suppressing the aftermath. But they were too late. The ledger lived. And Connor Blackwood was not done. Not yet. Not by miles. Chapter 10, The Return. Crossing the invisible line. Northern Ireland greeted them with a cold wind sharp enough to cut. Finch guided Connor across a sloped field toward a derelict barn hidden behind a line of bent hawthorn trees. The ground was soft underfoot, mud swallowing their boots, the air rich with the scent of peat, wet moss, and the metallic undertone of distant rain. Connor's legs felt like lead. His mind flickered between grief and numbness. Every heartbeat seemed to echo Aoife's last breath. Finch kept glancing back toward the Irish border, as though expecting the hooded figures to crest the hill at any moment. "They won't follow this far," she murmured. Connor wasn't convinced. "They followed us across the sea." That was different. "How?" Finch didn't answer. Because she didn't know. Or didn't want to. They slipped into the barn. Dust and stale air swirled around them. Old tractor parts rusted in the corners. A generator sat covered under a torp. And there, beside a stack of hay bales, leaned a man who looked carved out of the very soil itself. Declan. Not the grinning veteran Connor had met during the Dublin escape. This Declan was stone. Older. Weather-beaten. And grieving. He gave Connor one long look, measuring him, assessing him, mourning Aoife through him. His voice was rough. "She died hard." Connor's throat tightened. She believed in the story. Declan nodded once. That she did. Silent weight settled in the barn, the kind reserved for funerals, wakes, and losses too large for ordinary words. Finch stepped forward. "We need a crossing. Soon as possible. It's closing in behind us." Declan lifted the torp. Beneath it was a rusted cargo truck patched with mismatched plates, held together by hope, history, and duct tape. "We go tonight," he said. "No more delays." Connor frowned. "How?" "We don't have ferries. The coast is crawling with alerts. Dublin is in chaos." Declan smirked through grief. "Lad, you're forgetting one thing." "What's that?" "We're Irish." He climbed into the truck. "Get your ass in." 2. The Smuggler's Road. The truck rumbled through winding country roads under heavy night clouds. Headlights off. Only the pale silver glow of the moon guided them. Connor sat between Finch and Declan, clutching the satchel of ledger files as if it were a newborn child. Declan smoked his pipe, steering one-handed. "Back during the Troubles," he said, "we moved more guns and men over borders than the Brits ever knew." Connor swallowed. "And now you're moving truth." Declan grunted. "Truth's heavier." Finch cracked a faint smile. He's not wrong. Connor watched the countryside drift by, farms, stone fences, abandoned barns, broken street lamps flickering like dying fireflies. Northern Ireland at night felt hollowed out. Like a battlefield long after the war ended, waiting for another. The circle has roots here too, Finch said quietly. Old ones. Declan nodded, pipe ember glowing. Aye. They were in Ireland before they were in Britain. Before the church. Before the crown. Before the clans. I've heard their name whispered by old men who never feared anything else. Connor's stomach tightened. And they're hunting me. They're hunting what ye carry, Declan corrected. You? You're just the vessel. That doesn't make me feel better. It wasn't meant to. The truck slowed. Declan flicked his pipe ash out the window. Next part's tricky, he said. Keep your heads down. They approached the coast, cliffs black against the moonlit sea. Waves crashed far below, a dull roar beneath the engine. Finch stiffened. Movement. Connor tensed. Where? 2 headlights. Half a mile back. Declan didn't look. Ignore them. They're just the Garda. Or farmers. Or lads who owe me money. Connor swallowed. Or circle. No, Declan said flatly. They don't need headlights. That didn't help. They turned sharply onto a narrow declining track carved into the cliffside. The road ended abruptly. At the sea. Connor blinked. Declan, this is a cliff. Aye, Declan said. And beneath it? He flicked a switch on the dashboard. Lights beneath the water came alive. A shape rose. A small submarine. Rusty, beaten, ancient, beautiful. My God, Connor whispered. Finch laughed for the first time in days. Declan, you absolute lunatic. He winked. Smuggling ain't a young man's game, but I kept a few toys. The sea foam lapped at its corroded hull. You two get on board, Declan said quietly. I'll stay behind. Connor froze. What? No. You're coming with us. That thing's got 2 seats, Declan said. And one job, getting ye to Holyhead unseen. Finch stepped toward him. You can follow in the truck. Declan shook his head softly. They're already here. Connor's veins turned to ice. Finch pivoted. 2 figures stood at the cliff's edge. Hooded. Tattooed. Silent. More behind them, dozens. The chanting began, low, harmonic, ancient. Declan drew a shotgun from beneath his seat. Go, he growled. Finch grabbed Connor's wrist. They ran, splashing into knee-deep surf toward the submarine. Declan charged the chanting figures, roaring, firing with wild courage. Connor climbed onto the submarine hull, slipping on seaweed. Finch shoved him toward the hatch. Connor, move! He scrambled inside. Finch dropped in behind him and sealed the hatch. The last thing Connor saw through the circular porthole was Declan firing into the horde, smoke and embers rising around him as the sea swallowed the submarine. Then darkness. Engines humming. Pressure building. They descended. Connor pressed his forehead to the cold metal. Declan. Finch closed her eyes. He chose it. Connor broke. 3. Beneath the sea. The submarine was cramped, barely enough room to sit. Pipes rattled. Gauges flickered. Water creaked against the hull. Finch strapped herself in. Connor wiped tears from his face. You all right? She asked softly. No. She nodded. Good. Means you're still human. Connor stared at her. How do you do it? What? Keep going. After everything. Finch leaned back. I've seen worse, she said quietly. But never anything as important. Connor clutched the ledger satchel. It feels cursed. It probably is. The submarine ascended after a long, claustrophobic hour. The hull scraped against sand. Finch opened the hatch. Cold British air flooded in. And we're back, she said. In enemy territory. For the warehouse in London. They moved through coastal scrub, then hitched a ride on a freight vehicle carrying lamb feed. Hours later, exhausted, half frozen, they reached London's outskirts. Finch guided Connor to an abandoned warehouse beneath railway arches. Dim lights flickered from inside. Wren stepped out from the shadows. He looked like he had aged 10 years. His eyes were hollow. His coat was soaked in the storm. Connor, he breathed. Finch. He stepped forward. He embraced Connor briefly, a gesture that broke something inside the journalist. You survived, Wren whispered. Connor nodded weakly. Barely. Wren glanced around. Where's Declan? Finch shook her head once. Wren bowed his head. I figured. He motioned them inside. The warehouse was filled with MI5 dissidents, exhausted, tense, running communication scans, loading weapons, burning documents. A war room built from scraps and desperation. Wren led them into a small office. He locked the door. His posture slumped. His voice cracked. The situation has deteriorated, Wren said softly. Every outlet you could publish through is gone. Connor's blood ran cold. What do you mean, gone? Wren met his eyes. Blackwood. The circle moved faster than any of us predicted. Finch stepped forward. How bad is it? Wren inhaled shakily. The emergency broadcast is scheduled. Dawn. Tomorrow. Full national override. Ritual coded. It initiates the neurological compliance cycle. Once it's aired, vision stream becomes irreversible. Connor felt the world tilt. You're telling me, tomorrow they take control of everyone? Wren nodded. Yes. Connor staggered. Finch caught him. No, Connor whispered. We publish tonight. We release it. We leak every file. To who? Wren demanded. Aoife is dead. The Sentinel is gone. The Circle owns the state. Ireland's burning. Every Western intelligence service is compromised. Connor's fist shook. There must be someone. There isn't, Wren said. Silence. Crushing. Final. Then Wren's voice softened, unbearably gentle. Connor, this isn't your fault. The room spun. Connor dropped into a chair. Finch knelt beside him. You're not thinking straight, she said quietly. Wren approached. He hesitated. Then he placed his hand on Connor's shoulder. His voice broke. I'm so sorry. Connor blinked. Wren stepped back. Pulled a pistol. Finch's eyes widened. No, Wren, don't. Connor froze. What are you? Wren's voice trembled. If they can't silence you, we must. Your martyrdom will fracture their unity. Your survival, ensures their victory. Connor's breath caught. No. Wren whispered. We can't let you be captured. The suppressor flashed. Veil the fall. Connor didn't feel the first shot, just impact, heat, then cold. He collapsed. Finch screamed, a raw, animal sound. She fired at Wren, wild, desperate, but MI5 dissidents burst in and restrained her. Wren fell to his knees, sobbing. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, this was the only way. Connor lay on the concrete floor. Blood spread beneath him. His vision dimmed. He reached for Finch. Don't, breath shallow. Let them win. Finch cried harder. I won't. I swear. Connor's vision blurred into black shadow. He felt weightless. Then nothing. 6. The Unbroken Ledger. Hours later, in a forgotten bedsit across London, a laptop woke itself. A file decrypted. A message triggered. Connor's failsafe activated, just as he had coded the night before Aoife died. Every file, every video, every document. Sent to hundreds of dead drops, thousands of encrypted mirrors, millions of potential recipients. A single message appeared on screens around the world. The truth doesn't die with the truth teller. Connor Blackwood. 7. The Circle's realization. In a boardroom high above London, lined with oak, stone, and modern screens, 12 members of the Circle gathered. A hooded priest closed his ritual book. A woman in a black suit spoke softly. The heron is dead. Another replied. And yet the ledger lives. A ripple of unease passed through the room. Then the eldest, whose tattoo spiraled across his hands, whispered. Prophecy unfolds. As it must. 8. Finch's vow. In a safe house, Finch wiped blood from her hands. She stared at Connor's notebook, the last thing he ever clutched. She opened it. On the final page, written in Connor's handwriting, were 4 words. If I die, continue. Finch breathed in. Slow. Shaking. Then she stood. Eyes burning. Jaw set. Then I will, she whispered. And the war of the apocalypse began with that vow. Chapter 11, The Final Cover-Up. A nation wakes to a whisper. Dawn broke over Britain like a dying bulb, flickering, hesitant, sickly grey. Across London, a strange digital heartbeat pulsed through Reuters, servers, phones, and screens. Most ignored it, assuming it was an update. Others noticed, briefly, before brushing it off as a glitch. But for a select few scattered across the country, hackers, journalists, dissident coders, disillusioned intelligence analysts, that pulse came with a message. A message signed by a dead man. The truth doesn't die with the truth teller. Connor Blackwood. And then the ledger opened. Images. Videos. Documents stamped sovereign eyes only. Mortality projections. Implant schematics. Neurocompliance algorithms. Night harvest field reports. Circle ritual insignias embedded in government memos. Network maps linking media giants to cult hierarchies. Spreadsheets labeled acceptable casualty thresholds. Screens across basements, bedrooms, backrooms, and hacker dens flickered with the truth. The truth Britain had been built to hide. For a handful of hours, from London to Glasgow, from Belfast to Bristol, the truth spread like wildfire. Until the Circle noticed. 2. The first silencing. At 6:12 a.m., the first dissident server was raided. At 6:28, 2 more. By 7 o'clock, 700. By 8 o'clock, all unregistered networks in England experienced coordinated outages. Firewalls melted. Encrypted forums vanished. Anonymous nodes blinked into nothing. 1,000 digital voices were erased before breakfast. The circle's hand moved quietly but decisively, like a surgeon cutting out infection. The British public barely noticed. The few who did were quickly labelled hysterical, misinformed, bot-infected, or victims of foreign propaganda. Government spokespeople issued calm statements on morning television. No evidence of systemic wrongdoing. Anonymous misinformation being circulated. Stay calm and disregard unverified leaks. Anchors nodded obediently. Experts nodded louder. By noon, the ledger had been suppressed. But not erased. It had spread too far. Too fast. It had taken root. 3. MI5 fractures. Wren stood alone in a darkened hallway beneath Thames House. CCTV feeds flickered along the walls. Tactical teams moved through corridors with quiet urgency. Something enormous and terrible was unfolding around him, but Wren felt distant from it, as though he were watching a storm hit another city entirely. His hands shook. Blood still stained his cuffs. Connor's blood. He couldn't wash it out. He tried. The sink ran pink for 20 minutes before he realized it wasn't changing. He stared at the fading marks like they were a confession carved into his skin. A young analyst approached him nervously. "Sir, the director wants you upstairs." Wren didn't respond. She tried again. "So?" Wren lifted hollow eyes. "What does he want?" The official statement. On the leak. He wants your briefing. You're the closest to the source." The analyst's voice trembled. Everyone in the building had heard about what happened in that warehouse. Everyone knew Wren had pulled the trigger. Wren exhaled slowly. "Tell him." He struggled to finish the sentence. "Tell him I'm running diagnostics." "But..." "Go." The analyst left quickly. Wren leaned against the cold wall, gripping his head. He whispered, "I ended it. I ended him." His fingers tightened. "I did the right thing." The words had no weight. He repeated them. Louser. Desperate. "I did the right thing." A door opened down the hall. Someone stepped out. Finch. Her eyes burned. Her face was streaked with tears and blood. She had escaped custody. Killed one of the guards. Vanished. Returned for one purpose. Wren froze. She took a slow step toward him. "You murdered him." Wren flinched. "I saved him from worse," he whispered. "You murdered him." She moved closer. Wren backed against the wall. "Finch," he rasped. "You don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly." She reached into her coat. Wren squeezed his eyes shut. "Please," he whispered. "Just make it quick." But Finch didn't draw a weapon. She drew Connor's notebook. She threw it at his chest. He caught it instinctively. It felt heavier than steel. "Live with it," Finch hissed. "Live with what you did." She turned and vanished into the shadows. Wren slid down the wall, gripping the notebook like a drowning man clinging to a raft. He sobbed into his blood-stained hands. 4. The emergency broadcast. At 11:59 p.m. that night, British networks flickered. Every television. Every phone. Every radio. Every public announcement system. Screens went black. Then white. Then black again. A voice spoke. Calm. Measured. Warm. Soothing. The kind of voice that belonged in churches and state funerals. Good evening, United Kingdom. The Circle's high priest. Hidden for decades. Now stepping from the shadows. You are safe. You are protected. You are guided. Images flowed across screens. Smiling doctors. Blue skies. Families hugging. Flag imagery. Church bells. A subtle, rhythmic pulse beneath the visuals, unnoticed by most, but unmistakable to Finch, Wren, and the MI5 dissidents. A neurolinguistic cascade. A ritual broadcast. A spell. Phase 2. Compliance initiation. The voice continued. Together, we enter a new age of resilience. Millions watched. Millions listened. And millions felt something soft and warm coil inside their minds. A suggestion. A seed. A quiet surrender. Only those who had seen the ledger resisted it. Only those who knew the truth felt the wrongness in every syllable. Finch smashed her screen with the butt of her pistol. Across Britain, others did the same: hackers, rebels, dissidents, old soldiers, and Glasgow's growing underground. But for the vast majority, the seed took root. The birth of the underground. In Glasgow, a man named Connor Blackwood watched the broadcast with growing horror. He was a mechanic. A quiet man. Forgettable. But he had read the ledger. He'd been awake all night. He saw the symbols hidden in the broadcast. He recognized the ritual cadence. And he understood what was coming. He switched off the screen. Stood up. Opened his phone. Typed a message. Sent it to 30 trusted contacts. A message that would ignite a revolution. Connor Blackwood died for this. We rise at dawn. That message spread from pub to pub. From mechanic shops to underground venues. From university dorms to tenements. By morning, Glasgow had more truth believers than the entire rest of Britain combined. The Circle noticed. But Britain was too big to crush in one movement. Scotland would burn later. 6. Finch's flight. Finch fled across London's rooftops as patrol drones scanned the streets below. Rain soaked her clothes. Wind cut her face raw. But she didn't slow. She didn't dare. Connor's notebook was strapped to her chest. Every step she took was agony. But she whispered the same vow as she ran. I won't let you die. She reached a hidden MI5 dissident exit point, a forgotten tunnel under an old tube station. She ducked inside. Hand shaking. Jaw clenched. Heartbreaking. She knew what she needed to do. Connor wasn't gone. Not really. His ledger was alive. But his story was unfinished. Finch reached a dim-lit chamber deep underground, a hideout known only to the dissident network. She opened Connor's notebook. Tore out the last page. It read, "If I die, continue." She folded the page. Closed her eyes. And whispered, "I will." 7. The Circle ascends. Atop the shard, the Circle's high priest watched the city below. He lifted his hands. Phase 2 is complete. A dozen robed figures bowed. He smiled. The harvest begins. 8. Wren's collapse. Wren sat in his dark apartment, surrounded by prescription bottles, empty whiskey glasses, and classified files he could no longer read. Connor's notebook lay open on the table. The final page was missing. He whispered, "I'm sorry." Over and over, until his voice cracked. Then he whispered a different sentence. "They were right." Tears slid down his face. I did what had to be done. He reached for his gun, then stopped, and instead reached for the file marked "The Heron Prophecy." The prophecy he had never wanted to believe. The prophecy he had now fulfilled. He flipped it open and screamed. 9. A spark in the dark. At 3:14 a.m., in a damp basement in Glasgow, Connor booted up an old encrypted laptop. The ledger files glowed on the screen. He gathered the others: engineers, students, nurses, pub workers. Ordinary people who had seen enough lies to know truth when it finally appeared. He placed his hand on the screen. "So it begins." A woman beside him whispered, "For Connor." A man added, "For all of us." And somewhere deep underground, Finch whispered the same words. And in the highest tower in London, the Circle's high priest whispered, "For the harvest. The war to come." Britain went to sleep under one sky. It would wake under another. Connor Blackwood was dead. But his death had broken something. A fracture. A crack in the Circle's perfect world. A wound that would bleed into revolution. And the first flames of the coming apocalypse were about to ignite. End of Volume 2, The Dead Man's Ledger. To be continued in Volume 3, The War of the Apocalypse.